Hello again. Welcome to another episode of the movie discussing Pocket Dimension, where time does not exist and the only thing that matters is film. I'm Jay, and here as always with me is Cole.
Hello.
And today we're going to be doing Outrage from 2010, the Takashi Kitano film. Um, basically, really dark Yakuza film that just, constant betrayal and double crossing and battle for turf. Um, but yeah, I know it was your first time watching. What'd you think?
Oh, it was cool. I mean, what you said, it reminded me a lot of some of the definitive Yakuza ones from the 70s, that series, Battles Without Honor or Humanity. It basically
Yeah.
follows the exact same thing. The only difference is this is
Mhm.
2010, so it's a bit more modern, established Yakuza, whereas those, at least the first one, talks sort of about the beginnings of how it's formed. So in that one, it's a lot more disorganized, and they don't have all their traditions and things in place yet. And then they made like 4 or 5 sequels, which I've seen. I think all of them except the last one. They made them like really fast, like within
Yeah.
like 1 year or something like that. And I kind of mix them up because they're very like this one. They move at kind of like a breakneck pace.
Mhm.
Stuff just keeps happening. People keep getting killed and betrayed and things like that. But yeah, it's very much in that vein. And of course, Takashi Kitano, or his stage name when he's a performer anyway. He directed and stars in this. Beat Kitano is such an interesting guy who's had such a crazy career. He's kind of done it all. He started out really as he was a popular comedian in Japan in the
Really?
70s, which is
I
yeah,
didn't
which
know
is
that.
where that's where he actually adopted the name. He was part of a comedy duo with another guy named Kiyoshi Kaneko, so he was Beat Kyosho, so they were the two Beats, and that's how they started out. They got really big and famous, and actually, it was during this time when he was famous as a comedian that he met a lot of real life yakuza. Because I don't know, I
Mm.
guess they thought he was cool and wanted to hang out with him. So sometimes they would tell him about the life and things like that. So um, this movie is very realistic in its portrayals, and will probably remind a lot of people, even if you haven't seen the movies, maybe of like the Sega series Yakuza.
Mhm.
It's basically like a shorter version of one of those games, and of course, Takashi Kitano is in one of them. He's in Yakuza 6, The Song of Life, which I do own, but I don't own a physical copy of. I have it digitally, but here's a couple of them. Here's
Oh, cool.
Kiwami, which is the remake of the very first one, which came out in PS2 back in the day when I didn't know about it. So that's the remake for PS4. And here's the latest one, Like a Dragon, which is the first one to have focus on a new protagonist after finally letting what's his name retire. Who was it? Kira. I can't think. It'll come to me later. Anyway, he's in the first 6 games as the main character. Although the fourth one's a little different because the fourth one, which is my favorite, which I don't actually own in any way, is lets you play like 3 or 4 main characters, and he comes into the game a little bit later, but he's still the main character. But they want to do a new start, I guess, because they followed him for like decades. So there's a new character here. What's this guy's name? Ichiban Kasuga. But anyway, I don't have 6 physically, but I do have it digitally. Yeah, and Takeshi Kitano voices a character in that. And he looks pretty much like it too. Like I think they just modeled him after him. The character he plays in the game looks like him in real life, pretty much. Um, yeah, I have kind of
Yeah,
a
I'm a.
weird history with him. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say I'm a big fan, and when I actually realized who he was, I went back and I was like, oh man, I've seen this guy in tons of stuff. He was in
Yeah,
Battle Royale, a film
yeah, we've seen.
adaptation, and he was in the remake of Zatoichi, the Blind Swordsman.
I think he directed that too.
Probably so, yeah.
I think that's another one he
And
directed.
then I've gone back and watched a lot of his stuff that I hadn't seen, and he's just, I mean, really great filmmaker and actor, I think.
Yeah, he's in the new American version of Battle of Ghost in the Shell, which I haven't seen. Don't really want to see it,
Oh, I'm
but
not
he's in a
watching that.
really weird movie. What is it? Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, which was a Japanese film in '83 about World War II. David Bowie was in it of all people, so that's kind of interesting. That was his first sort of non-comedic role, I think. But it's weird because he's bounced. He even as a director, his career is odd because he starred like as a straight man, like not a funny guy in the movie Violent Cop, and he was not originally the director of that. And I think the director, I don't know if he had to leave for some reason, but anyway, one of the producers suggested that Kitano directed himself, so he did, and not only did he directed himself, but he actually made a lot of changes to the script. So sort of an interesting beginning of his career, that section of his career, to be a director, because I don't know if he'd even given it any thought before that, but obviously he liked it or thought he was good at it, because he would go on to direct quite a few other movies and all over the place, really, with the genres. He did bounce back to comedy here and there. He did a weird sort of sex comedy called Getting Any in 1997 that I really want to see, because it's supposed to be like it is a sex comedy, but it's also in the comedy vein. I think it's supposed to be sort of like in the style of something like Airplane, where it's just like sort of one of those wacky anything goes type of worlds, which is sounds really interesting to me. As far as movies he directed that I've seen, he did one around the same time. Shit, I'm not gonna be able to get the title right. I can picture it in my head, but I want to. Hold on, let's see if I can take a look at his filmography. Hana B or Bai or something like that. It also in '97, or Getting Any was '95. As it turns out, Hana B, HANA hyphen BI, sometimes known as Fireworks, was another sort of crime drama that he directed and starred in. I saw that many years ago, and I forget a lot of it now. And I didn't know who he was back then. I didn't know anything about his career. One of the funnier things too is my first ever apartment that I lived in 2003 and 2004, I lived with my former college roommate and my sister. We only lived there for a year before he moved out. My sister and I moved to a new, smaller place, but we lived in this place on Edward Street. It's flat. And I remember a show that we started watching, I guess it was on Spike TV, was a show called MXC, which I think was supposed to stand for Most Extreme Challenge. And it was a gag dub, and it was a gag dub of a popular game show type thing that the Takashi hosted back in the late 80s. That was the only thing I didn't know, because I knew it. Obviously, it's a gag dub. What it is you see these Japanese contestants going through a bunch of weird, kind of semi-dangerous outdoor challenges, and there's like a really weird host who, at the time, I had no idea who he was or what it was about. But the gag dub puts it all in English and gives it, bizarre, completely made up dialogue, as gag dubs do. Give another example of a gag dub of a Japanese thing to show if anybody remembers Samurai Pizza Cats, which was a weird enough anime, but when it was brought over here, it wasn't just translated. It was also a gag dub. So if the original, I don't know what the original show's called was anymore, but I mean, it would have completely different dialogue than what was in English. And another further step is, apparently that show's never gone on DVD or anything anyway, which is too bad. If you were in Canada, you actually got a bit more stuff out of it, because some of the stuff that they originally put in, this is the gag dub, was censored out of it for American audiences for whatever reason. Like, the show had a narrator that was always saying stuff, and one of them was like, they were coming back it's like after a commercial break, and it's like, we now return you to more, like, I don't know, something like more mayhem and gratuitous violence, just a joke like that. And for some reason, the American censors hacked that out. What's funny is, like, as soon as I read that, I remembered the exact episode where they said that too. But anyway, that's a gag dub, where you just, make up entirely new dialogue for the dub. But anyway, so I mean, we used to watch that show and get a big kick out of it, and we of course knew sort of what it was, and it even said at the end, Takashi's Castle. But back then, I didn't know who he was, and I also didn't realize the original show was that old. This was early 2000s, 2003, 2004-ish. I didn't know that they were showing a show that ran between I think 87 and 90. I had no idea. But anyway, it was a lot of fun, and we used to enjoy that. So that's one of the weirder things about his career that sticks out to me. That all those years before, I enjoyed something and that, like, at the time when they said Takashi, it didn't dawn on me that was like supposed to be a specific person, because I didn't know he was a big celebrity in Japan at the time. So I just thought, it could have meant anything. But yeah. Mm-hmm. Did you ever catch that show back then?
Which one?
Oh, back in the early 2000s on Spike, they had a show called MXC, and it was a gag dub of Takashi's Castle. Remember?
Yeah.
All those weird outdoor challenges. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So we used to watch that, and then of course I knew it was a gag dub, and I knew it was based on a Japanese show because it's Japanese people. But I didn't know I didn't know anything about really him at the time, and also I didn't know that the show was that old, because the footage is actually from the late 80s. Because I think the show ran from 87 to 90.
He was on that show?
He was the host. That's why it's called Takashi's Castle. It was all
Wow.
centered around him. He was the host, and it was Isn't
Had
that
no
funny?
idea. Had no
So
idea.
like just a crazy, and they made so many different versions of that show. Like every country had their own version of the show, except for
Mhm.
like Canada, and the U.S. eventually did one too. In fact, the U.S. had a couple aborted tries in the early '90s. I think back then they were so worried about lawsuits and things because people could really get hurt.
Yeah.
But
I think
anyway,
there's some of
used
those
to
that are
really enjoy
still
that.
on. Some of
Yeah,
those
but
like copycats.
yeah, but the original was
Which
MXC, which was originally based on um, Takashi's Castle. But I was talking about gag dubs. If you remember the Saturday morning cartoon, another anime brought over Samurai Pizza Cats. That was a gag dub. Like the original show in Japan was wacky, obviously. It was really weird comedy. But when it was brought over here, they threw out the dialogue and just did a gag dub. So sometimes, like,
mhm.
the episodes, they're completely different as far as like what is it being said, which is kind of cool. I used to watch that show a lot. Again, not really knowing at the time. I probably just figured it was a straight translation, but it's not. It's a gag dub with a lot of
I just
Canadian
thought it
talent.
was a I just thought it was a ripoff of Ninja Turtles.
I mean, in a way it was, but it goes a lot deeper. I'm sure
Mhm.
in many ways, I think it was probably an anime meant to somewhat parody the Ninja Turtles. And then in turn, when it was brought over here, we did sort of a parody of a parody by giving it a gag dub instead of just translating it. So it's a crime that show never wound up on DVD because I thought that was a great show. I really enjoyed it. A lot
Mhm.
of early '90s wackiness.
Mhm.
But yeah, his career is just bonkers. He's done it all. He's also a successful author. And what's weird is his books have actually been translated into French, but not English. He sort of done it all. He's the first celebrity to ever work in the design of his own video game. He worked on they did a Famicom game in the late '80s called Takashi's Challenge. I don't know if it was
Oh,
based on that or not, but he actually took not just an act. He was an active role in that as even a part-time designer. So he's the first and probably one of the only celebrities to ever be able to say that. And of course, he's just as a television personality, he's been a host for various shows. I think he sings because pretty much everybody over in Asia, if they have any sort of career, they probably sing. I think he might have released an album or two or something. So he's just he's just done it all. And his career as a director is interesting enough because of how it bounces between genres. Because he'll do the
yeah.
serious crime drama like this show with a lot of strong violence and themes, but he'll also do
Mhm.
wacky comedies. And even before this, he'd done some, I don't want to say experimental, but sort of less mainstream type of movies coming into this. Like the one before that was Achilles and the Tortoise, which is some sort of weird surrealist uh, semi-autobiographical thing, which was actually part of a series. I think it's the third. Anyway, so
Hmm.
he's sort of done it all. And as I said, well, you were off screen. The first movie he ever directed, it was kind of an accident. It was Violent Cop, and he was cast to finally sort of break out of his role as a comedian and be more of a tough guy. And he was in that movie, and he was one of the lead characters. And the director had to quit for some reason, and then one of the producers suggested he direct it, so he did, and he's been a director ever since. So yeah, he's had an amazing career.
I don't think I've seen that one. I've definitely heard of it though.
No, I haven't seen it either. I saw um oh, already said it what it is. Now I forget now. How quickly I forget Hanabi or Hanabi or something. Hanabi, I guess, which was a crime drama from the late '90s that he did. I
Did
think that's the only other one I've seen that he directed besides this. Although I've seen other movies that he acted in.
mhm. He
Although
did one called
right,
Sonatane or something like that. That was
yes,
similar Yakuza film.
yeah, it was not a success at the time, but it's considered pretty good now or something. But yeah, but his career is just bonkers. Really interesting guy.
Not quite as dark as this film is, and they went on to
Hmm.
make 2 sequels to this film. So
Yeah, I just
um,
found that out.
I haven't seen the
We've
third one
got
yet, but the second
Beyond
one's pretty good.
Outrage. So, spoilers, people, but doesn't his character die at the end of this movie?
It
So, does that
doesn't
mean his
show him
character?
die.
Oh, okay, so his character, I assume, is in the sequels then, yeah. It shows him stabbed, but not
Yeah.
necessarily dead. Although it's reported that he's dead. because at the end, the dirty cop comes and he talks to the new head guy, the guy that had just killed his boss and taken over, and he says, "Oh, he got stabbed in prison." Like, he makes it sound like he's dead, but I guess that's an easy enough thing to fix if you're going to make a
Well,
sequel.
yeah, I mean, it's always one of those things you can leave it open to where, it's not like he got shot in the head and he's back all of a
Right,
sudden.
right. So I don't know if they address it in the sequel saying like, "Oh, people thought he was dead or they faked his death or whatever." But I mean, it's an easy enough thing to explain if you want to. So yeah, I am interested in seeing the sequels.
Yeah, so basically, this focuses on a main family. The Sanakai is the main head family with the chairman that basically is calling all the shots to the other families that uh, are kind of, they're not exactly on the same team, but they kind of help each other out sometimes.
Yeah,
But
the hierarchy can be difficult to understand.
yeah, it really is, and it's so many characters in this that I know that's
Yeah.
what you had told me you kind
Yeah,
of had
I
a
watched
problem
this
with, and
movie 3 times because I had a lot of trouble keeping track of the characters and who was with who
mhm,
and why they were like most of the movie is just a series of we said killings and betrayals, but a lot of the
yeah,
time I wasn't sure who was being killed or for what reason or by who. I finished watching it for a third time today in 2 days, so I have a better handle on it now. Although there's still a couple scenes where I'm not 100% sure who was getting killed or why. Like at one
right,
part, there's a younger guy that gets followed onto a plane. He tries to skip town. I don't remember where he was or what he was doing beforehand, and I don't know who's actually killing him or why. So that's one of them. Because they catch his
yeah,
buddy and they like beat him up and say, "Where is he? You might as well tell us." And he says, "He's gone back home to Kirome or something like that." And he actually
mhm,
made it all the way onto a plane. But then a guy sits down next to him. I think it's a plane. Maybe it's not a plane. Maybe it's a train. Because it seems like maybe
yeah,
they're going through a
could be,
tunnel and he gets shot. So I guess it's
yeah,
probably the
yeah,
train. The train makes more sense. And you hear the gunshot, so he gets killed. Like I don't
mhm,
remember seeing him earlier. Obviously I did, because it's such quick reprisals. You'll have like one gang attack or kill a guy in one scene. In the very next scene, it's like the payback for that. It just happens immediately. It just shows
yeah, it
like how
was,
chaotic the whole thing is, really, because it starts as something fairly kind of innocuous and just snowballs into kind of chaos. And it's kind of funny the way sort of the Grand Yakuza leader Sekiguchi seems to view this, because he threw everything into motion. It was by his wishes that they do something about Murase. It all starts like he's upset about Murase and he wants something done. But
right,
every time something actually happens, he's more and more annoyed by the consequences. Meanwhile, Murase, who doesn't know that Takeshi has any problem with him, really keeps, asking his friend, who's actually been the one that's been asked to take him out. He keeps asking him for advice. That would be Ikemoto. So just to bring this up, there's a big assembly where like almost all the families show up at the compound. Again, it's very realistic.
mhm,
This is literally exactly what these meetings are like, what they look like. There's a lot of transparency here. A lot of Yakuza or former retired Yakuza have been very open about what the Yakuza lifestyle is and their traditions. It's interesting. There's a lot of transparency there. So what we're seeing is very realistic. But anyway, they have their normal meeting. We don't really know what happens. But anyway, the sort of the head lieutenant of Sekiguchi, whose name is Kato, he asks he asks Okamoto to stay because he has
mhm,
something to say to him. And it turns out Ikemoto. I said Okamoto. Sorry, it's Ikemoto, and then Otomo is within it, and Otomo is who Takashi Kitano is. So yeah,
right,
we're gonna trip up. We're gonna trip over some names here, not being as familiar with the Japanese names. But anyway, the gist is he's not happy that he is involved with Murase. I don't think Murase, as you said, is technically within the umbrella
mhm,
of this syndicate, at least not officially, but he still, I guess, might deal with them, because there's a part, of course, where he comes in and he bows and talks to him and shows him respect and everything like that. But anyway, the whole thing is he's not happy for the association between him and Murase.
and
And you don't even
their
know why at
brothers,
first.
they bonded in prison. They had a pact in prison over sake.
Right. So the whole thing is like, I don't care about your pact. I
Right.
want them taken out. And I don't. This is one of my. This is not a problem with the movie, but one of the reasons why it's a little hard for me, or we'll see how far we get. Is like whenever I criticize a movie, one thing I don't ever want to do is criticize a movie by pointing out the things that it's not, because that's dumb. Like, for instance, you could say about this movie, well, this movie doesn't really have particularly good or deep roles for women. Women aren't important in this movie. Like, you shouldn't
Hmm.
criticize it like that, because that's not what the movie's about. If it's Yakuza, well, guess what? Yakuza is male centric. It's male dominated. Women don't really have any part in it, right? So
Hmm.
I won't like criticizing movies for things that they're not. I think that's a silly thing. But I will say there's very little character in this movie. In that, I thought originally, um, once again, I better double check names here. I thought originally that Ikamoto might feel some conflict about this, but he shows none. Like, he's just
Turns
told to
out,
do
yeah.
it, and he's just
Hmm.
like completely fine with it. He's also completely fine with like dealing with Murasei as if he doesn't know what's going on. Like, Murasei keeps
Hmm.
coming to him for advice, and he's just like, "Oh, do this, do that," where he's the guy
Hmm.
who's fucking him. And it's the same thing with our main character, if you want to call him that, who is a lieutenant of Ikamoto, and that is that is our guy Takashi Kitano, who plays Otomo. Otomo is like a lieutenant to him with his own sort of smaller family under him,
Right.
and he sort of delegates it to him. He says, "This is for you and your family to take care of." Again,
Yeah,
no
he
problem.
does all the
Okay,
dirty work in the beginning. Like he
right.
goes and
He
takes
and
out
his family, they do it all. Yeah.
mm,
But
is
as the movie progresses, like, there's nobody ever seems to have, like, there's no time for moralizing, there's no time to think about loyalties. People just do it. You know,
yeah.
it's all action and reaction, and I don't exactly have a problem with that. It's just like, it keeps the movie very simple and very briskly paced. So I don't know how much we're exactly going to be able to analyze or discuss from that angle, because really the characters just do what they do. He's Somebody orders you to do something and you do it. And at a certain point, if you see a chance that maybe you can betray the guy above you, then you do that too. But we never actually see a scene of anybody contemplating it, planning it, talking about it. It just happens. Everything's boom, boom, boom. It's a very brisk movie, which again is very similar to the Battles Without Honor and Humanity series,
Hmm.
where those are even more frantic than this. These at least sort of have some more quiet scenes, with I don't know, quieter things going on and not necessarily crazy violence. Whereas the other one would have scenes like that would last for about 30 seconds before something crazy would happen, like an assassination attempt or something.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I don't want to say I have a problem with that with the movie. I'm just saying it keeps the movie very sort of simple, because there's no, I don't have a feel for any of these characters. They're just all Yakuza who are willing to kill if they're told
Yeah.
to, or who are willing to kill if there's a way to get an advantage out of it.
Hmm.
Nobody Nobody falters. Nobody hesitates. Nobody seems to really be better at it than anybody else. It's all sort of a timing thing. Like, you could say, "Oh,
Yeah.
Otomo's really tough." I mean, sure he is, but lots of guys look pretty tough in this movie. So, I mean, you feel really bad for Murasei, because he has no idea what's going on. His world is
Hmm.
crumbling around him, and of course, he just winds up getting murdered in the end. And it almost serves no purpose by the time things are over, which I'm sure is part of the point. Again, they're sort of showing maybe some of the pointlessness of of these power struggles, and also how sort of the hypocrisy of something like the Yakuza, which is supposed to be a brotherhood, but how quickly loyalties change. I mean, that's very well illustrated here.
Well, one of Murasei's guys gets killed, and then without his approval, his guys retaliate and kill one of the other family, one of their people, and that's when it really gets started. That's when the chairman really drops the hammer down on Murasei.
Yeah,
It really
which is,
wasn't even
I
his
mean,
fault, you know.
well, I mean, that's what he wanted though. He wanted an excuse to come down on Murasei, which is funny.
Yeah.
Even the chairman was worried about how things looked, because that's what they said. That's what Kato says at the beginning. Uh, it says at the beginning to Ikemoto. He says, like, do this like sort of quietly and low key.
Mm-hmm.
We'll make it look, and he said,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we'll do a thing where it's like some sort of a rivalry, and that's when he tells Otomo, he says, open up an office in their territory, which is really what starts the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Just
I
a
don't even. That's the
battle
other
for
thing. I never.
territory.
So everything's close to the chest too. Like even though there are scenes where characters talk about like what are giving orders, I still don't really know if they're playing a longer game or if they're just reacting. Because if the chairman is playing a longer game, he does a good job of making it look like he's actually super annoyed the whole time. Because every time another act of violence or somebody dies comes and there's a scene with him, he's pissed off about it. I'm like, you set this whole thing in motion. It was your idea, you know. So
He's pulling the
are you just?
strings.
Yeah, I mean, he
He's
is.
playing everybody against each other, and eventually it comes toppling down on him as well. So no one is
Hmm.
safe.
Yeah. So full spoilers here. At the end, his own lieutenant Kato kills him, and it's a curious scene because it sounds like he ordered Kato to kill the sole survivor of Murasami's gang. God, was it Ozawa? I think it's
Was that
Ozawa.
Ozawa? Okay, I thought Ozawa was under
Or no, yeah,
um
you're right. Not yeah, you're right. Ozawa was under Ikemoto, right?
Ikemoto. Hmm.
Yeah. So he says to him, you know, now you can get Ikemoto to retire and
Right.
you can take over his gang. Or no, well, wait, I'm backing up. So in an earlier scene, he says that. He says, you know, you can take over. And of course, by this point, Ikemoto is dead because Otomo has killed him and turned on him and killed him. So at this point, it's towards the end, we're at the compound or at the beach or whatever. And now he's saying, you
Hmm.
know, job well done. Now you can take Ikemoto's place.
Right.
And then he says to Kato, "All right, Kato, take him down and celebrate." And it seems like he's saying, "Okay, Kato, kill him." And
Right.
Kato does kill him, right?
Hmm.
Because it goes in slow motion, and you see that he's sort of smiling and reacting to him shooting him. It's like, "Oh yes, that's what I wanted." So okay, and then of
Hmm.
course he's really surprised that Kato in turn shoots and kills him, and then tries to plant the gun to make it look like
Right.
that Ozawa and him shot each other.
Hmm.
Or that he shot Azawa down after he killed the chairman, so he could become chairman. And then we get our little epilogue scene with him chairman and the crooked cop.
Right.
Oh god, uh, Kataoka, reporting to him. And Kataoka is just as ruthless as any yakuza. He acts like he acts like he's on friendly terms with some of them, but not really. When he reports at the end that Otomo's dead, like he doesn't care. You know.
No. Well, he
Here's
sets
another
up
thing.
Otomo and his guys.
Yeah.
He's the one who gives the information.
Right. I mean, you seem like maybe he does care. Like they talk and they have some sort of relationship, and then towards the end, you know, he says it's not a good idea to fight this and get yourself killed. Let me arrest
Hmm.
you. So it
Yeah.
seems almost like he does have some compassion for him, like better to take you. And then when he supposedly gets killed, although I guess according to the sequel's not killed, but stabbed in prison, when he reports it to Kato as the new boss, he just seems kind of amused by the whole thing. It's just like, and he said, "Did you plan the whole thing?" And he goes, "Me? No way, I couldn't do that." And you're like, I don't know. But here's a curious thing. So, what did of course, we had to watch this subtitles. So, in the version you watched, what did the detective call Otomo? Translated, I mean.
Champ. Champ.
Yes. Right. He calls him champ. And it's in mine too. Now, what he's saying is senpai. And why I'm saying this is weird
That is
is
weird.
because if you know what senpai means, it's not quite teacher, but it usually means like it
Sensei,
can be
right, or
used for
something like
teacher.
that.
It's sort of like a lower degree of that because sensei doesn't just mean teacher. It usually means like an elder person you respect. Senpai is kind of like a lower version of it, usually like a senior student to like a junior student, like a
Gotcha.
senpai kopai thing. You know, kopai is the lower senpai. So I thought about this, why they would translate it as champ, and all I can figure is he's calling him senpai sarcastically,
Hmm.
and that champ is a way to do that. Because when you're calling
Yeah.
somebody champ, it's never really sincere. It's kind of like you're making fun of them.
Right.
So
Right.
my
And they
understanding is he's calling him senpai sarcastically, and the champ is a way to illustrate that to English speakers.
There was a little plot development there where they had a history. Apparently, they knew each other when they were younger, and the cop was apparently a good boxer. They say that at one point, but
Well, he says he's just a
uh,
lousy boxer. He says he was always a lousy
yeah,
boxer.
Otomo says he was a lousy boxer, but someone else earlier says that wasn't he a good boxer at one
Yeah.
point, and
Yeah,
then
well,
like
twice the
Otomo
first
kind of
time
beats the shit out of him.
Atomo says I never saw him win, and then they have an exchange. It's funny too because like Atomo, and it really speaks to the way Yakuza feel about perception. Because the whole thing is Otomo's been brought in to be questioned by the cops. He's in the room with that detective and some other detectives. So to put on a show for the other detectives, he's grilling him hard and threatening him and yelling at him and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Then the others leave the room and he's like, "Sorry about that, champ. You know I have to act that." But Otomo's still annoyed that he did that, and then like he beats him down. Um, the detective does take a swing, but it doesn't work. And then he just says, "You always were a lousy boxer." But then towards the end, they do have another. They have another scene together, and this time he punches him out of nowhere. And you see later,
Yeah.
Otomo checks his lip; his lip's bleeding. And I think he's referring to like, well, maybe he did have some talent as a boxer. It's just a kind of a little thing going on in the movie. It's like maybe he's a little better than I said he was. I mean, the guy's well into middle age. I mean, his boxing days would have been long over. But the thing about that is,
Right.
you never 100% lose it. You still got something.
Well, in a way, he's almost the most crooked character in the movie because I mean he's not only getting promotions, and moving up and his job, but he's also taking money under the table.
Oh yeah,
So
he's definitely the most sort of successful guy. Plus, he has the protection of being a cop. These yakuza's
right.
all kill each other left and right, but it's pretty dicey to kill a cop. There's even a part where after he punches Otomo, the guys in the room are Otomo's guys, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I'll arrest all of you," and they all stand
Yeah.
down because they know there will be real consequences. Now, at least one cop does get killed in this, but for one thing, he's not a detective, and another thing, he's more of a pawn. That's another thing. That's like it's not exactly clear if Ozawa ordered him or not. That's again towards the end of the movie they're where one of them is trying to leave because everything's going to hell, and a driver has come out to wait for him. And before he comes out, this cop comes and asks the driver for license and registration. While he's doing it, the cop murders him. But one of Atomo's guys coming out of the house sees this and also shoots the cop. They shoot each other,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not even sure if Ozawa had orchestrated or not. So there's a lot of people to keep track of going on here. Another one would be the guy that actually winds up killing, or supposedly, or at least stabbing Otomo at the end, is Kimura. Kimura is a lieutenant within Murasai's gang, and early on things go pretty badly for him, and then he disappears for a while. And I guess that's why it's supposed to be kind of a twist that he's gone. They try to kill him. You remember there's a part where there's a car chase and they kill one of them, but they shoot at
Mm-hmm.
him and he gets away. Then you don't see him for the rest of the movie. So it's kind of a little bit of a twist that at some point off screen he got arrested and put in prison, and there he is right next to Otomo to stab him.
What was
So it's
his
kind
name
of a little bit
again?
of a twist. His name was Kimura.
He was there, when he got his face cut with the razor.
Yeah, yeah,
The kid with the long hair you were talking about that was on the train, he
yeah.
was there with him. So I think like the kid was kind of under him.
So he's another one of Murasai's.
Mm-hmm.
Murase's. He's one of Murase's. Okay, yeah. So yeah, there's just so many scenes of this guy getting attacked and that guy getting attacked, and I'm not always 100% sure who's
Well,
acting for who, and yeah. There's also a
not
part
to
late in the
sound
movie.
racist, but
Oh, it can
this
be
is just a
hard with
bunch of Japanese guys in suits. You kind
a
of
bunch of
get
guys
some of
in
the
suits.
characters mixed up.
A lot of them are of similar height. A lot of them
Yeah,
obviously have dark hair, although some of them are bald. So yeah, unless there's like a big age disparity, it can be hard. Yeah, we're not trying to, but I mean, some of them stand out, like Ishihara. Now,
right.
Ishihara, as far as I could tell, was part of Ikamoto, but he was not under Atomo, as far as I could tell. Or if he was, I never saw him like taking orders from Atomo. But he was definitely part of. He
Was
was
he
definitely part of Ikamoto. Ishihara's the skinny guy with glasses, and the only part
glasses?
of that
Yeah.
gang that doesn't die. And because one of the things he stands out for is like he's very ruthless, but also he's very efficient. Is one of the things. Like he's always sort of getting the best of the people in his scenes, and by the end of it, he's the only member of that gang that's not dead or in prison, and he's sitting there at the table with the new chairman. and they say something like how he's moved into sort of semi-legitimate business, something like, they're saying he's like playing the stock market now or something like
Yeah.
that. It's like that's
Yeah.
something that would have happened under the old leadership. So yeah, he's a pretty clever guy. He also speaks English pretty well, as we find out in the
Yeah.
movie.
He does.
In that
He speaks very well.
because there's a whole
Um,
subplot there.
I
Well,
was
there's a
about to
part
mention that.
where I don't know if they're Otomo's guys. Again, I figure they're Otomo's guys. So they're trailing guys working on Murase's turf, and they find this dealer there. And the whole thing is Murase's turf is our turf now, so you can't deal without our permission. They beat him down, they threaten him. He says, "Well, I have some information to give you," and he tells them about how on Murase's turf there's an embassy for this African country, and he says the guy there's kind of crooked. And we use it to move drugs and do things, and we're protected because the cops can't search the place. So they say, we're taking that over now. Oh, and we're going to make the guy open an illegal casino, which he doesn't want to do, but, they force him into it. So there's some English there, because even the guy's African, they use English sort of as their common language to talk to each other. Even though the guy speaks he's an ambassador, so obviously he is fluent in Japanese.
Yeah, I don't know why he talks to these guys in English. I mean, he speaks Japanese. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because at one point he tells him, he said, "What are you speaking English for? Speak Japanese." And he still just speaks English until at the very end when they've got the body. That he's gonna making him go bury a body.
Yeah. Then they use him to bury. It's actually pretty clever how they use him, because they use his car with its diplomatic plates to get past the checkpoint. So they won't, even though like literally the cop sees blood coming out of the trunk.
Right.
They're like, "Hurry up, we're very busy. This is very important." He's like, "Oh, better let you go." Yeah. Then they all just leave him. And it's funny. It's not funny, but it's a good reminder to people who are used to just watching like American gangster movies that like racism works all sorts of ways. And there's a part where they all leave him. They say, "You finish up." And he's like, "But it's dark." And he's like, "Dark? Well, you'll blend in, So
yeah, I caught that.
Yeah. But it is kind of interesting that they use English as the common language. I mean, certainly it's much more likely for a Japanese citizen to speak some English than, whatever African language this guy might be as this normal thing. Because that's how it is often in a lot of countries. You'll have like people from different countries, and English is like the common language that they use. It's funny.
Don't they teach English in a lot of the schools, like in Korea and Japan and stuff?
Oh yeah, English is the most widely spoken language in the world. It's not spoken by the most people, but and that's one of the reasons why it kind of sucks to be an Anglophone, as I said many times, because we're so used to just going to other countries and having people accommodate us. Like, someone's going to speak English. It's a widely spoken language, and it is a big deal. It's important for people in other countries to learn English because it's sort of one of the global languages. But I was going to say, yeah, a couple of years ago, I went to a seminar thing for the library program I'm in for the tutoring, and I was there with some other tutors, and they did other things, and there's this girl there, and she was from India, so she wasn't an English tutor. It was interesting because speaks to how good her English is, because she was there as some sort of, I think, like math tutor for people. So she's tutoring various people in English and math. But anyway, I stayed and talked to her for a while when it was over, and she was waiting for her friend to come see her. And she had a friend who was from a different part of India. And she said, English is our common language. We don't speak the same language that we grew up from. Like, English is how we talk to each other. The Hindi I speak and what she speaks are different. So English is how I've always talked to her, because we're from different parts of India, which I thought was pretty interesting. They said dude a lot, which I thought was funny. They used dude a lot and called each other dude. It was weird. I don't know. Sometimes foreign people find like some slang in English they like, and they just go for it. And that's kind of what they did. Like they seem to think dude was a very good word, so they referred to each other as dude and stuff all the time. I was like, wow, it's like I'm back in like elementary.
Well, dude.
She's like, dude, I'm serious. She's like, I know, dude. And of course they're saying this, with fairly notable Indian accents, so it makes it all sort of more amusing. But yeah, so English often sort of works out as kind of a common language for people from different countries, because it is very widely spoken. But you feel really bad for that guy, because yeah, sure, he is a little bit crooked, but you see what happens. You dip your toe in it, and now the next thing you know, you're in way over your head. They even do like
Yeah,
a
I
honey
mean,
trap. They even do a honey trap thing with him where he thinks they make him think that like he maybe murdered a prostitute or something.
right. And they just kind of set that up, right? Like she wasn't really
Yeah.
dead.
Yeah, I guessed that. I was pretty sure she probably wasn't dead. And then you see later, yeah, that she wasn't. And he even sees later, but he knows to keep his mouth shut because there's not much point. He does actually mention at one point. He says, "I saw that girl. She's not dead." Yeah, and they threaten him a few different times, ending with a thing where they lock him in his bathroom with a snake
Right.
to get him to lowball him because he's saying, it's risky enough running this casino, but you guys are like, I don't even. He's like, I'm only making 30%, and he demands, he's like 50% or I'm out, 50%, and I'm telling the cops. And like the
Yeah.
next scene is him getting trapped in the office, and they make him go back. I think they make him go down to 20. He's like, fine, 20, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the girl that they set him up to, he thought he killed was the girl from Audition.
Oh wow, she's
She was in there as a call girl somewhere. Maybe not that one, but
yeah. Yeah, I really lost track of that because towards the end, when they're showing so much death, when like Otomo's gang is getting killed, they show a woman in black who's dead. Was that his girlfriend, Otomo's girlfriend?
Otomo's, yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't 100% sure. I was pretty sure, but you don't get really to see her face. She's at sort of a weird angle and she's dead. But yeah, you feel bad for her too. Although, I mean, again, if you're with a yakuza, you kind of know. Because at one point, he has an early meeting where the cop tells him, people are onto you, they're following you, they know the car, you should switch cars. And you find out later he does switch cars. When he's getting in the car with his girlfriend complains and says, "Why are we using this car? I like the old car." He's like, "You want to die?" Which is kind of not
Right.
exactly right because it's not about death; it's about the cops following them. But still, and she goes, "Oh, I'm so scared." It's like, you haven't seen how dangerous it can
Yeah.
be to be in this lifestyle. And then, I mean, at the end, his office gets bombed by a grenade for God's sakes,
Hmm.
and she's killed sometime during or after that. But yeah, still feel bad for her.
Yeah. Casualty of war.
Yeah. I mean, to his credit, not too many civilians die, which is really in tune with the real life Yakuza. They really do. It's really rare for them to kill civilians. And I mean, obviously, this movie ups the violence. There has, of course, been real life killing and violence in the Yakuza, but nothing on this scale unless it's been covered up. You'd have
Hmm.
to go back to like the early 70s, kind of when those movies that I was talking about were coming out. That was sort of when they were at the most violent. These days, the Yakuza always has the threat of violence, but they're very quiet in their crime. They'll do things like extortion, kidnapping,
Hmm.
things like that. And the
Hmm.
kidnapping is always handled without the cops. They'll hold somebody for ransom, they'll pay the ransom, they'll let them go. That happens all
Hmm.
the time. It happens with the triads in China too. It's just part of the game, as they say.
Isn't it funny that like the main boss guy like just wears a sweatsuit? Everyone else wears 3-piece suit.
Part of me wonders if that's some sort of like influence from like Western crime, like that maybe he wants to be kind of like an Italian mafia don because don't they kind of dress
Yeah,
like that? Yeah,
like a velour suit.
yeah. Because yeah, I mean, as we see the Yakuza very smartly dressed. That's true to life. They're
Hmm.
always very smartly dressed, and of course the tattoos, which is a funny thing.
Hmm.
Like I don't have many tattoos, but if you're a person that has like say a fair amount of fairly visible tattoos, you're going to stick out in Japan because the only people that like that in Japan are Yakuza.
But they're usually wearing long sleeves and long
Yeah,
pants, so you wouldn't see them anyway.
that's true too. Just like there's a few things too, again, from Western culture that Yakuza use, which is like, I don't know if it's so much true now, but it's certainly true in the 80s and 90s that the Yakuza, they preferred like big American cars,
Hmm.
like to a
Hmm.
lot of the smaller Japanese. And they also like dark sunglasses a lot, which
Hmm.
I think again is sort of imitating some like Western culture. But to the point that you'll find like a lot of Japanese civilians, if they're wearing sunglasses, they're maybe a lighter kind or more hippie looking kind. Like they won't have like the big sort of Men in Black type shades. Like that's
Hmm.
almost. I'm not saying that's like a no and you can't do that, but that is directly associated with the Yakuza. So I don't know if a bunch of Yakuza would like threaten you or beat you up if they saw you in it. It just seems like the type of thing that you should kind of avoid.
Mm-hmm.
At least if you're an ordinary Japanese citizen. I assume if you're a tourist, you get a bit of a pass. You're just a lame gaijin like me or Jay.
There's a few scenes where you do see some civilians that are, you know, they witness, but they just go on about their business. They don't, you know, they're not going to poke, you know, stand around and
Right.
watch or anything. They're getting out of there.
Right. I mean, a few
Yeah.
times civilians sometimes are involved. Like they're mad because like what? It's like some little restaurant is part of Murase's territory. Remember they go in and they like hack the chef's fingers off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
serve it
he's
up
not
to
exactly
someone.
who's and the joke is the guy doesn't even look, right? He's like, okay, go on, serve it. But the guy's like reading or looking at his phone or something. So he doesn't even
Yeah.
notice he got a bowl full of noodles with like the ends of some severed fingers in there. But yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, again,
Yeah.
they're not above that. They intimidate the ambassador, who is technically a citizen, but he's a sort of a well-placed, unique type of citizen, right? He's somebody they can really take advantage of. But in general, they more or less leave civilians alone.
So drugs, casino, uh, and stock market.
Yeah, I'm sure some prostitution in there too, because there's a part where
Oh yeah.
they come back and they're mad and it's like how many girls you have, how much money do they take in, things like that. Although that doesn't always have to be prostitution, because I'm sure, and again, if you play the Yakuza games, you can go to those like host clubs where no sex or anything happens, but technically you're paying girls for company, more or less, is what it is. You go in, you drink, you eat, and then you've got pretty girls, and you pay them just for being around you.
That seems so weird to me.
That's like a mini game in like every Yakuza. In every Yakuza game,
Yeah.
you always wind up running a host club and trying to
Mhm.
and trying to outdo your competitors. It's a lot of fun, actually. It's quite addictive. It's funny. I'm like there buying like accessories for these girls. I'm like, she'll look so divine in this. She'll make so. It is weird though, because it's not prostitution. There's no sexual things going on. It's just having the company of these girls. Although technically you can date these girls, but I don't know how much it's like a real date again. It's really weird. But sometimes if you're like a preferred customer or, high roll or something like that, you can take these girls on dates. Although it's usually with the understanding that she probably dates other guys too. And as far as
Right.
like getting anywhere, I don't know. But you can, yeah, it's very interesting.
That's like beyond pathetic to me. I know it's a different culture, but it just seems so odd to me. It's like
Yeah,
like going to strip clubs, you know, that's pathetic, but I mean, I don't know. This seems odd.
it would definitely feel weird to me.
Hmm.
But I mean, I get it. Just to have the company of young, pretty girls, I can see how that's a commodity. It's certainly not my day to day life, but yeah, it would feel kind of weird to go to a place where I pay specifically for that.
Is it like a status thing? Like you want other people to see you surrounded by beautiful women or whatever?
I don't know, because I mean, that's the whole point of those places. I mean, anybody in there
Hmm.
that can pay is going to get that. So
Right.
I
Right.
don't know. Like, it is a little hard to see from the outside culturally. I mean, certainly Japan, like in places like Japan and Korea, they've kind of over nurtured an entire generation of lonely young men. Not that we don't do that here too. I mean, you see
Hmm.
stuff like like the crazy results are like crazy bitter incels. I don't know.
Yeah.
As I like
Yeah.
I
That's
like
sorry.
I
Go
don't
ahead.
understand how in most places and countries I know there's some parts of like Nevada. Like I think we should follow Nevada. I think prostitution should be completely legal and
Hmm.
above board and regulated. That way, it would be better and safer for everybody involved, particularly the sex workers. And I don't think there should be any. Uh, yeah, I don't understand. It feels like a useless cycle that we're running through here, where you have people that are in the sex trade, and we're arresting them and punishing them, and we're arresting and punishing the people that pick them up. And I feel like it could all be so much safer and everything if it was above board and legal and regulated, because it's true. Yes, cops and people will boast about getting people out of sex work that never wanted to be in there in the first place. Yes, human trafficking happens, but a lot of people aren't being human trafficked and they're being treated like they were. Some people, that is their chosen profession. So yeah, I feel like it should just be legalized, and that would make things a lot simpler, because
I
the
agree.
system we have now is just useless. And the funniest thing, of course, is like porn, right? You can pay a girl have sex with you if it's on camera because you're making porn. So that's not prostitution, which is really stupid. Even if you're never even going to distribute the porn or do anything with it. I mean, technically, you're still making pornography, which is protected in the U.S. certainly protected under the Second Amendment, or not Second Amendment, whatever, the free speech one. Is that the anyway? Is that the
first one?
That's the First Amendment. Yeah, Second Amendment is the gun thing. The First Amendment's free speech. The fifth one is about not incriminating yourself. Those are the ones you hear about all over the But anyway, same thing here. But anyway, the whole thing is, yeah, like the cops can't like bust into like a porn set and bust everybody for prostitution, because it's like, nope, freedom of expression. We're creating art here.
So
it's,
I mean, couldn't you like loophole? Couldn't you just like throw a camera in the room and get a prostitute and say we're just making porn over here?
As far as I know, yes. I mean, the only thing that makes it a little different from other porn is like if it's actual above board porn, then everybody's getting paid, right? It's sort of the thing. Whether it's the female performers, the male performers, they're all performers, they're all getting paid. Whereas the difference here is like you're paying a woman to have sex with you or somebody else, but that the other person having sex is not being paid. I don't know how that works, if that factors into the law or not.
You just start a new business.
Yeah. Can't touch me, coppers. And the other thing that's weird about that too is sometimes they'll do like weird undercover sting operations at places like, that they suspect of having prostitutes. Like a big one is massage parlors, obviously, right? So it's supposed to be officially just an ordinary massage parlor, but there's always that secret language where for a little bit more money they'll have sex with you. There's been lots of times where the cops will do like undercover sting operations there, and they will actually have sex first before they make their arrests and everything. And
you gotta be sure.
They'll say that this is crucial part of their job. So that's really hypocritical to me. So if that's a crucial part of their job, imagine the prostitute. That's their whole job. So you're saying they should keep the laws so that you don't get in any trouble for having sex with these people because it's part of your job. Like, I don't know. That seems pretty iffy to me too.
Research purposes.
Yeah, I had to go like 5 weeks in a row before I had built enough of a case. I had to try.
Had to keep going back.
I had to go at least once with every girl just to make sure every girl was involved. Because some of them might have just been normal masseuses, but I found out no, all prostitutes. And here's my rating system. I gave Jenny a 9. She was great. Stuff like that. That's great work, Simpson. You're going to be promoted for this. It's like, sir, I don't want a promotion. Just put me on the next brothel case, please. That's all I want. That's all I want. It's like, you'll make detective or lieutenant for this. No. I just want to stay on Vice or whatever the fuck this is.
But yeah, isn't there? That's like you were talking about the young males that are like all weird because they're playing video games all the time and stuff.
Yeah, they're basically playing like dating simulator games, and they have their their anime body pillow, things like that. Yeah. I mean, there was a whole thing about it, like this whole thing in South Korea, how like there's a whole generation of men that don't even really want to try to get actual girlfriends. And I understand to a certain extent, even as somebody who's had real girlfriends. I swear I have. I've been with the girls, guys. I've been with girls. But, I do sort of get it, because if you live in that world enough, like the real world can't match. It's like, well, I watch all these girls in porn and stuff. And in real life, I could never get a girl like that. So at least I can enjoy it from there. Because it's like, yeah. So that's the other thing.
Wow.
But I don't know. Sometimes you just have to settle, right? I mean, I get it. You grew up on this diet of goddesses with their amazing bodies, and maybe the girls that are in your league don't look or anything like that. But I don't know. Those are the cards you've been dealt.
Yeah, that's the whole incel thing too. You
Yeah.
know, they don't want me. They want a Chad, and I hate them because of that.
Hmm. I mean, and all that comes with from something somewhat, it makes a certain amount of sense. It can even be relatable. I'm not going to say I've never gone through dry spells and been like, what the fuck? Because I certainly
Right.
have. Where I'm just like, I guess I'm fucking invisible. I love striking out on Tinder. It's great for my self-esteem. But yeah, but you just can't take things so personally, I guess.
Hmm.
I don't know. There's no good answer for that, although some people say, well, that's why like legalizing prostitution is good for that too, because maybe it'll help guys like that. I mean, maybe it doesn't help them emotionally because they still have to pay, but at least it's something. I mean, I kind of would agree. At least it's something. It's funny. I was watching, not to get on that tangent again, but in the fourth and final part of the we need to talk about Cosby doc. There's this woman there who's like some sort of, I don't know, sex therapist or sex expert and stuff like that. And they're talking about like Cosby having that kink where, despite the fact that he was famous and he could have sex with a lot of willing women, he liked the idea of having sex with unconscious people,
Right.
and that is apparently a kink. And she said, possibly an environment could be set up where something like that is consensual. She said you could find sex workers that are willing to have that happen. You pay them, you make the
Hmm.
agreement, and that you drug them. And I'm thinking, wow, I mean, we're really thinking outside the box for solutions on this one. I mean, sure, I mean, I guess I'd be all for it. I really have to take my hat off to a sex worker that wants to go that far, though. I don't know, being a sex
Yeah.
worker and saying, okay, here's the jobs and stuff. Oh, in this one, you're going to be drugged. So you cool with that? Give you an extra 100? Okay. Yeah. I don't, I don't know though. I mean, again, an outlet is better than nothing.
It almost seems like it's like a necrophilia type thing. Like you want them to act like they're dead.
I think
You
for
know.
some of them, yes. And I've seen stuff like that where that really is a kink. Now this is 100% speculation. So I'm going to make a weird speculation about Bill Cosby. So don't take it too seriously or too far. It's just a guess. I have no evidence. I don't know. But what I know about Bill Cosby, of course, that we all know is that, of course, he's an older guy. He's pretty old. But even when he was younger or whatever, he was sort of an old fashioned guy, right? He always had sort of old fashioned views and values. I think now we realize that it's even further than that. Almost feel like Bill Cosby was one of those guys that thought of sex as something that's basically for men and that women don't like it or really want it. I almost feel like Bill Cosby would view women who actually want sex and enjoy it as like harlots or something. So he likes the idea of having sex where the pleasure is all for him. Is kind of That's only a guess. Only a guess. I don't
Hmm.
know. But that's kind of seems like it to me, that like the whole kink of like drugging the women. Because as we know, he had willing women. He was Bill Cosby. It wouldn't have been that hard. Not everyone's going to say yes, but a lot were. But it was always seemed to be his MO to like ply them with a drug and alcohol, and he liked to have them unconscious. And part of me feels like it's just a guess, complete speculation. You can dismiss it as bullshit, and I have no idea. It's just a guess that like might be some of his weird old school twisted values where it's like women don't actually like sex or want sex, and the women that
Hmm.
are like that are dirty whores. So I
Right.
like the idea of like I just control the whole situation. Sex is for me, woman.
Hmm.
It's not for you. You're a tool that I will use for this. That's all guesswork. I don't know. So make of that what you will. But I was thinking about that just the other day when they were talking about that whole unconscious thing. So I was thinking, yeah, there's a kink, but I think there's also, in Cosby's case, possibly a philosophy that goes along with it, which might be why he was actually willing to just admit it, like
Yeah, that
under
is
being
interesting
asked about it. Like he just sort of says, like, "Well, yeah, I did that," like as if like that's a normal thing to do. I don't know. So
because the statute of limitations had expired, I believe, on
right,
date
that was
date
the other
raping.
thing
What do you
about
call that?
yeah, that was the other
Yeah.
thing about that like confession or whatever it was, right? Like he was speaking under the assurance that he couldn't be like prosecuted for it when he like admitted to
Hmm.
some of this stuff. Like I don't
Yeah.
remember what the legal precedent was or what the parameters were, but it was understood that like he couldn't actually be prosecuted for what he was about to say, and he understood that, and he said, and yeah, he said, yeah, I did give this person or that person or people in general this drug or that drug with the intent of having sex with them when they were unconscious. Like he did actually say that because he knew he couldn't be used against him legally, which might be one of the reasons why he got out. Because remember, he went to prison for a while, but now he's out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew it was some discrepancy in the way they handled the trial,
Yeah.
something like that. It was kind of like I forget what you call it, not acquitted, but it was just thrown out because of they didn't follow some standards they were supposed to.
Right. And what people want to get across from that is like he's not been exonerated. There's
Mhm.
nothing where the law has said you're innocent. Oh, and of course, Cosme and his camp are treating it that way. It's like justice has been done, and I'm out, and I'm innocent. Anyway, we won't go down there. But I was just thinking about, and I watched that part again today. I watched that whole documentary like 2.5 times. I watched like the first part twice, the second part 3 times, the third part 3 times, and the fourth part twice.
Wow.
Just very interesting. But I watched the fourth part for the second time again today, and I was just thinking about that whole thing where the sex therapist was talking about like how we could accommodate people that have that kink in like a legal, morally acceptable way. I was like, well, good luck finding volunteers for it, but I don't know. I guess in a way you could say compared to like the illegal the normal day-to-day life for a lot of illegal sex workers where it's illegal, how dangerous and crazy that could be, being in like a safe regulated environment, I guess they probably could accept maybe a situation like that where they say, okay, I'm willing to do that for extra money or whatever.
Mhm.
It's weird.
Mhm. Definitely. Yeah.
But people always say prostitution is the world's oldest profession, and yet we keep
Yeah.
treating it like it's not we keep treating it like it's not a profession.
Well, like you were saying, I mean, if you legalize it, I think the only reason it's illegal is because of the cops make money off of it, right? Like
Yeah,
off
and
the
there is a certain crowd that will always flip out, on the basis of morals. And I'm not saying they're wrong, but sometimes I think they're kind of misinformed. Is more what it is. But yeah,
Well, I mean,
have
you've
you
got
ever seen any of those shows about one of the brothels in Nevada? There's like a
mhm,
Bunnyland brothel or something. It's all
mhm,
very, it's all by the book and above the
mhm,
board. It's very popular for like for couples, of course, because a lot of couples have that dream of having a threesome with some pretty woman, or sometimes
mhm,
even a present for the man or something. Which, okay, I think that seems sexist to me, but whatever people decide on their own is fine.
mhm.
If you're in a relationship with a woman and she wants to give you a present of having a threesome with that's entirely your business. No judgment here. I couldn't ever imagine any girl I ever dated thinking that would be great, and honestly, I kind of would be shocked if they were.
Mhm.
But again, well, that kind of stuff, that's people's own business, and I do not step on that. But yeah, but I remember years ago there was, I don't know if it was a show or a documentary, but it was about one of those. It might have been like Buddy Land Ranch or something. It was one of those legal brothels somewhere in
Yeah.
Nevada, and that was what happened a lot. Is they'd have couples come in that wanted to have a girl, or sometimes maybe get two girls for somebody because that was a dream. Fine, I guess if you have the money and the will, go for it. And yet, it's only in a very small part of the country and nowhere else.
Cat House, I think, is what it was called.
Yes, that's what it is. Yeah,
Yeah, I watched, like, maybe an episode of that, and I remember it was really weird. It was a guy with his son, like, who had just turned 18, and he was getting him in there so he could, get his first lay or whatever,
yeah.
which
See, I think
is
that's
just
really
crazy.
weird and fucked up too. Again, no
Yeah.
judgment, but I think that's really fucked up too. Because I don't. And it seems like a weird thing to teach your son too.
Mhm.
I'm not saying everybody has to be so morally upright and things like that, and your first time has to be magical because even if you want your first time to be magical, it's probably not going to be. Like you can really try and take all the steps you want to make your first time magical and wonderful, and 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be. I mean, every once in a while, yes, for somebody, oh, that was magical, and it's the person they fell in love with, and they're together to this day, and that's great. But that's just not reality for most of us, even if we tried. But I don't know. Yeah, it's funny. Like I said, I don't want to come down on one side or the other, and I'm making fun of people for being overly moral. But I guess if I can't take out some of my own morals, it seems fucked up to me that a father, one, thinks it's important that his son loses virginity. Like, whatever, just mind your own business about that. And two, either thinks his son sucks so much that he can't like get it from like a relationship or something that he has to take into that, or just thinks this is the better way of doing it. I don't know. That seems like a really messed up way to like. Again, I don't want to do judgment, and it's different for everybody. But I don't know. I think I'd be really disappointed if that's how I lost my virginity.
I think it's that old school, like, come on, bro, go in there and
Yeah. Yeah,
get you
it's
one.
like that's the thing. The dad's like, you're a man now, so it's
Yeah.
unacceptable. It's unacceptable as a man. You go another day being a virgin. So if I have to take steps and pay money, that's how we're gonna do it. Like, oh Jesus, yeah, that's really fucked up and weird to me, but whatever.
hmm But I mean, legalizing it would really help out a lot of women that are just caught up in that cycle of
Yeah,
pimps taking all their
ex-
money and stuff, and
exactly right. That's one of the worst things about it. Is like the pimps don't even do anything, and they're taking the money. And of
mhm,
course, a lot of pimps are, of course, very abusive and scary. So yeah, if we
yeah.
could remove them from the equation, that would be great. So the women
I
actually
mean,
get
this is
paid
it's
something fair for their work.
the same thing. Like if you legalize, drugs or some drugs, that would cut down on crime. I would think because that's what the gangs do. They sell drugs among other
Yeah,
things.
yeah. I think there's a lot of drugs you could legalize. We don't get into that, but I mean, there's a positive step, of course, with marijuana, but they could go further. Because I mean, yes, there are certain drugs that are so dangerous and bad for you that you
Uh,
shouldn't legalize them. But
I mean, I'm of the mindset where I don't really need the government telling me what to do with my life. So I don't know. I kind of feel like everything should be legal, but I mean, drug wise.
I get that on principle, but the reality I think would be terrifying because there's just so many people that can't handle drugs, and there's so many people that would. I
That
don't know.
would just go and get addicted like immediately.
Yeah,
Who maybe wouldn't have done it otherwise.
because I mean, yes, we're already dealing with where people are getting addicted and it's illegal. So I don't know. I feel yeah. I don't know.
Hmm.
I mean, it would be an interesting social experiment because yeah, I don't think like suddenly some successful, I don't know, really successful person is going to suddenly be like, I'm going to do heroin now. Like I don't think so. But I guess you don't know.
I think Portland or somewhere has done that. I don't know if it's taken effect yet, but it passed in one of the elections where they're legalizing all drugs.
I remember
Yeah.
there was at one of my schools, there was like somebody came to talk about drugs, and one of the people that was there was a lawyer, and he was just like, "Well, as a lawyer, it would be my best interest for it to all be legal. So that would actually make my job a lot easier."
I would think he'd say the opposite because he probably makes a lot of money, defending these people.
Yeah, but as we said, the same thing with the cops, like busting on prostitution and stuff like that. It seems like such a waste of resources to tie up the
hmm
courts with stuff like that too.
It really is. Yeah. Really just, penalizing people that are, addicted and they can't stop. I think we need to focus maybe more on, treatment, you know, government assisted treatment, that can maybe help some of those people out. But I don't know.
Yeah. The drugs they talk about in this movie, I think, is speed. Because when they go into like that
Yeah.
restaurant scene, when he's attacking the guy who's cooking, and he's saying some words, and the guy's like, oh, "I don't know what you mean." He's like, "Drugs." It's like speed, man. So they're saying that the drug dealers in that particular neighborhood in the Murasay territory are dealing speed, which is interesting.
Meth, you think? You think that would be meth?
I think so, or some kind of it.
Okay. The speed's kind of a generic term for uppers, could be a few different
Oh
things, but
yeah, There's quite a few things that would fall in that category. I mean, I guess that's the other thing about the drug or opioid crisis overall is like a lot of it is stuff that is legal now.
mhm.
So I don't know.
Yeah, basically prescribing people, medicine that they probably don't even really need, and then they get addicted to it, and then you take them off of it, then now they're drug addicts. Now they're doing heroin.
Yeah, I mean that has happened to a
So
lot of people
yeah,
for sure.
there's forget the name of the documentary, but it was all about I'm in Florida. It was a bunch of clinics in Florida that was just you would go in there and you're getting Xanax and OxyContin. You know, if you pay the fee to get in, you know you're going to get it. So
Mm.
just people crazy addicted to it.
Yeah, there's a couple. Oh, what are they called? What's methadone clinics? Not too far from where I live.
I didn't know if that
And
was still a thing or not.
they do quite the business here. The methadone, because there's quite a lot of people that are addicted to one thing or another, and the methadone is sort of their sort of compromise, I guess, in a way. It's not it's not exactly a solution,
Mm-hmm.
but it's something.
Yeah, when I was getting a tattoo done one time, this guy, the artist was he was real like agitated the whole time and really just pissed off. And eventually he tells me that he didn't get his methadone when he was supposed to. So
That's really reassuring while someone's
kind of
doing a tattoo on your body with a needle.
took it out on me a little bit. Yeah,
Oh, I got
it
the
hurt.
shakes. Oh, there we go. Whoop.
Yeah,
Oh God. Yeah, that's not
yeah, that was
ideal at
rough.
all.
Suffice it to say, I didn't go back
I was gonna say, yeah, I
to that
wouldn't. I
particular.
don't think. Yeah, no repeat business there. Yeah, I mean, at least, not to characterize people, because I mean, plenty of fine, upstanding tattoo artists, but at least it's hard to imagine like your dentist saying that. Your dentist is like, I'm gonna do a filling here, but I gotta tell you,
Right.
I'm kind of jittery because I didn't get my methadone. Stupid
Right. I'm gonna
cops
take that
hassling
appendix
me.
out, but
Yeah, exactly. Motherfuckers.
don't don't mind me. I'm gonna be real pissed off the whole time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
But
it's really a straightforward movie. It's why it's kind of not a whole lot you could talk about because it's kind of all out there on the screen. It's basically just you know, especially towards the end, it's just like murder, murder, murder. Constantly every
right, the
scene.
dominoes falling.
Hmm.
It's funny because we talked about this when we did live commentaries for the first two police stories, because the two Jackie Chan films, Police Story, since they were action movies and the story wasn't that important, the way they were written was first they just came up with locations where they wanted to have action sequences. Then they wrote the scripts around that to accommodate it. And that's kind of what happened here is that Takashi Kitano said he basically pictured different ways of like murdering and killing people, and he came up with that first, and then he sort of wrote the movie around that, which you can really tell. It's funny. You feel pretty bad for one of his most competent men, who is who is that? Mizuno.
Mizuno, yeah.
Mizuno's the guy that gets his head almost ripped off in the car, and
I
he
was really
faces his
rooting
end
for
with
him too.
yeah,
That
he
sucks.
because he was one of the more competent guys, and he really faces his end with dignity. He sent his girlfriend out because he's at least going to make the attempt to escape, and she comes back with a bag that's got a gun and some cash in it. And he has sex with her one more time because he figures there's probably a good chance it's his last chance of doing that. And then immediately upon leaving, they catch him and take him in the car. And he's saying, "Why are we doing this? Why don't we just get it over with?" And they're like, "Shut up!" And then
Yeah.
they do the elaborate thing where they stop the car and tie the rope to something on the side of the road and then drive and nearly pull his head off. Poor Mizuno. Yeah, I was hoping he would get away too, because he was one of the more competent guys, and he, like any of them, he could be violent, but he wasn't necessarily cruel. Like, I thought he was actually more likable than Ishihara, who actually does
Oh
survive
yeah.
this.
Trying to figure out the guy that did the killing, that killed him, or one of the guys. Trying to find his name here. It was the guy that gets killed at the end, right? The guy that
Oh,
gets
was it?
shot.
Was that Kato?
No, I'll say Ozo, something like that. Ozawa.
Ozawa, you mean? Oh, was that
Yeah,
Ozawa?
Ozawa.
Okay, Ozawa's one of them. Okay, yeah, because Ozawa was Murase's lieutenant, wasn't he?
Hmm.
And he was the only one left standing, or not
Hmm.
Murasawa's. He was Ikamoto's lieutenant.
Ikemoto, yeah.
Yeah, I keep forgetting Ikamoto's name.
Me too.
Just yeah, to reiterate once again, how it starts is Kato, who is the head lieutenant of the chairman, who's the head of everything, tells Ikemoto he's upset that the chairman does not like his association with with Murase and that family. And then Ikemoto, whose family is in control and over Otomo's family, tells Otomo to use his family to, start waging war on them. So yeah, it's sometimes hard to keep track of the hierarchy and who's associated with who, especially when people start like double crossing and turning on each other, as it
Yeah.
happens very rapidly, especially like in the last 20 minutes. Because by the time it's over, it's Otomo himself that kills Ikamoto. Because the whole thing is he's like, I did everything you told me to do, and now I'm getting banished and everything, and yeah, and so he turns on him and kills him, and which kind of makes sense.
Well, Murasei is the one that said he was banished to begin with, and then Murasei tells fuck Otawa. Is that his name?
Yeah.
No, Otomo. It tells Otomo that it was the other guy that decided that, not him. So he pits those guys against each other
Well, yeah, that's not
because he
Murasei
just
though. That's after Murasei. This is right after Otomo has killed Murasei and his guys. What was left? Remember, he goes
not
into the
Murasei.
bathhouse and kills.
Fuck
Yeah,
the chairman.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. And the chairman's like, it wasn't my idea. And the other thing is, it's
Mhm.
yeah, everybody's always dodging that. And when they say things like "this guy's going to retire" or "you're banished," they always say it's just a formality, but it never is. They just try to smooth it over by saying this is only a formality, but it's absolutely not a formality.
And he got banished for doing what he was told to do. You know.
Exactly, and that's why he freaks out and kills him. And he says, "I risked my life. I really put it on the line." He did. He walks into a place and shoots like 5 people.
Yeah.
No hesitation. As we said, Atomo was not the type of guy that struggles over this. He does what he's told, so he really gets angry.
Yeah. We get to
I mean,
see all the tattoos in that scene.
yeah, because they're
The
because they're in the.
what's the is there I know there's got to be a purpose for the patterns that they use. You have any idea what those mean? Like on the
Oh, it can be
shoulders,
really.
it's got the
It can
black
be really.
line,
It can be really elaborate. I think there's
and
some.
then
It's really
like a
elaborate. The whole
flower.
world. Yeah,
Yeah,
everything means
like some.
something.
Hmm.
In the Yakuza world of tattoos, it's a language almost of its own. Everything means something. So I'm sure they paid attention to that in the movie, but people like us, we would know. We
Hmm.
just know Yakuza have a lot of tattoos, but yeah, every tattoo they get means something. And there are certain tattoos that you're not even allowed to get if you don't, achieve a certain level and things like that.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a bunch of white dudes with those somewhere.
Yeah. Badass. I mean, it's a big
Yeah,
part of us is getting like Japanese and Chinese things on us because we think it looks cool and not even actually know what they mean.
or like the Pacific Islander style.
Oh man,
Those are
apparently
cool.
those are like super painful. You ever see,
Well,
the old school they do
they
that?
do it with the tap. Yeah,
Yeah.
that looks rough.
Apparently that's extremely painful. I mean, I don't know, but I remember seeing
I
some
bet.
shows where like, they get a big elaborate thing way across their back and it's like, I guess. I find tattoos
Well,
painful
it's
enough. I don't need to make them more
yeah.
painful. Like I'm not one of those people who's gonna lie and say it doesn't hurt. Of course it hurts.
Mhm.
My nerve endings work. It hurts. As I've said many times, like I don't have many tattoos, and my tattoos are pretty small. It's not like any of them were, big, elaborate things where I had to keep going back or anything like that. But the main thing I learned the very first time I got a tattoo was I immediately knew exactly where I wouldn't be getting them because I know where I can handle the pain and where I don't want to. People that get tattoos in the top of their foot are insane. You ever see those? And of
And
course, neck tattoos look gross. Look gross anyway, let alone getting
yeah.
it the actual pain. But
And the ones on the foot too, they don't stay. Like I know when you get one, they warn you. They're like, this is gonna fade pretty quickly. I guess
yeah,
just
because you're in
because
like a
it's in
shoe
your
all the
shoe.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, I
Well,
mean, it's another thing that's been a
uh,
casualty of money and priorities. Is like there's at least 2 more tattoos I want to get, and I've been putting them off for 5 or 6 years now. But yeah, I've always known there's places there. Now that I know what it feels like, I would never get it done there.
I'm going to get a full sleeve sometime soon, hopefully. I've just been trying to find an artist, and I can't find anybody that'll do it.
That's weird.
But I mean, I haven't, I don't want to go to anybody local. I've been looking at, people that have a lot of tattoos. I asked them, who did their stuff and,
Yeah.
good work. But I'm like, I got money, man. I want to pay you money to do this. And this
Mine are all pretty simple, so I just go wherever. Because if they're not competent enough to do what I want, then they're no good at all.
Right.
Because I don't really want anything elaborate. Although, like I said, like for like the blue here, I've always wanted some sort of pattern spattering of stars. But the thing is, I can't elaborate beyond that. So I really need to go talk to them and have them sketch some things for me because I'm not a visual person. I need I need to do one of those consultations and have them show me a couple options because I don't know. I have like a vague idea. I'm like, well, more blue and not filled in mostly, and I kind of feel like thin lines and spindly, but those are just words. I don't know. So I'll have to when I eventually get that done.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Because all I really wanted this, I just want more stars. I love stars. I just want more stars. I thought I'd have more by now, but it's, things happen and priorities and things.
The collarbone hurts a lot. The sternum hurts a lot. I don't have any on my feet or anything, but
well, I will say for the one that's here, I mean, it's here.
Yeah.
Even though my nipple is here, felt like my nipple was on fire the whole time.
Really?
Felt like a hot knife to my nipple the whole time. Even though it was like at least an inch away from the nipple, I felt like a hot knife touching it. So that was, so that was bad. But again, it wasn't too long or anything. Not a big deal. People interested in that can go back to one of the early sausage factories where I bear it all.
Oh, I think I've got it right here.
Oh my lord.
You can't see it. This is too small, but it's there.
I'm sure it's really flattering, me pulling up my shirt. I'm sure I look great in it.
Someone was asking you to do it. A female. I don't remember who it was.
Got to oblige. I don't know. Claire used to joke about it.
Was it Claire? Yeah.
It might have been Claire. Very well could have been. I found a good quote about Takeshi Kitano, which is funny. Subject: Takashi Kitano, otherwise known as Beat Takashi, Japanese film director, comedian, singer, actor, author, screenwriter, poet, painter. Okay, what wasn't this guy? And one time video game designer. Yeah, you hear that? One time, because one time is all he needed. After that, the seafloor split open and opened the Caribbean. Earthquakes ravaged the coast of America. Yeah, it's funny. Because yes, he's a very jack of all trades. Done it all in the show business world.
Apparently so.
And he has a very interesting sort of acting style. It's funny too because his roots are as a comedian, but he's sort of a very deadpan actor, right? He's a guy who doesn't show a lot of emotion and just sort of projects like being a tough guy. And one thing is that he has a very notable sort of gravelly voice that I like too.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when you're watching a foreign movie when they speak a different language, you don't notice the voices as much, but his always stands out to me. It's just sort of a gruff, gravelly, tough sort of voice. He reminds me. He's kind of like a Japanese Michael Madsen or something.
It was one scene where he was yelling at someone. They were yelling at each other, and it was just so funny sounding. The Japanese like that. I don't want to try to imitate it, because that wouldn't be right. But just sounded really cool.
What's funny is like even when he's yelling, like his face, his expression stays sort of neutral, which I think is funny. Like sometimes, yeah, he's yelling insults at somebody, but he's not like sneering or he's just sort of keeping a calm face while yelling angrily. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. It's something that makes him stand out from other actors. That's sort of a signature style.
In this movie, he doesn't really even have a whole lot of dialogue. He's really just
as I said,
an action guy.
Yeah. as I said, I don't want to criticize the movie for this, but the movie's not full of developed characters. It's really just sort of characters acting and reacting, which is fine. That's the movie being told here. So I mean, all we really get is like, yeah, they're yakuza, and most of them are tough, and
Hmm.
appearances are very important. So you can't, so they don't like being insulted, and you know they can be very threatening and all that kind of thing. But as far as like betrayal goes, you don't really see a dramatic side of it. It's not like I'm so hurt he betrayed me. It's just like, oh, I'll
Right.
kill him then. You know, they betray
Right.
me, I'll get them back, which is very practical, I suppose. If you're betrayed, there's not much point in dwelling on it, I suppose. But yeah, there's no like emotional scenes in this movie whatsoever.
None. None.
It's
I mean,
just
I don't,
action
that may be
reaction.
accurate. I don't know. That may be accurate for how those guys are. I mean, but
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, at the end, they still are human. There has to be some humanity to it. Um, you do see a bit of that in the video game series, for instance.
mm,
You'll
mhm.
see certain characters. Why can't I think of his name? It starts with a K. Kiryu. It's Kiryu. Anyway, Kiryu's the main guy in them up until this one. This is the first one without him. Focus on new guy. This one's a little bit different too, in that it's not your standard sort of beat 'em up. It takes on sort of like RPG elements. I don't like it as much. It's in addition though. It's a steel book.
Oh, that's cool. That's
Uh,
5?
this would technically they dropped the numbering. This would technically be
Okay.
7.
7, okay.
But yeah,
I definitely haven't played that one.
the first 6 are all Kiryu. He's the main character. I said I haven't played the original version of the first 2 games because they're so old, but they remade the first 2 games as Yakuza um, Kiwami and Kiwami 2. I own and I have Kiwami 2 as well, but these are the ones I own. I also own. There is one. There's also Zero. There's a prequel called Zero, and Kiryu's not the main guy in that. Goro is. But the main series, 1 through 6, Kiryu's the main guy and the main focus. But I also own Zero. I didn't bring it out here. But yeah,
I
you do see
may
that.
have
It is a
played
little different.
0. 0 may
Yeah.
be the one I've played. I think I played, like, 2 of those. I've got a bunch of them downloaded. I think I've got 1 through 5 downloaded, so I'm gonna go
I've
back and
never
revisit
played
those.
3. I've never played the original 1 or 2. I've only played the remakes, the Kiwamis, and I've never played 3. The first one I ever played was 4, which is still actually my favorite. I haven't spent much time with 5, but I own 0, Kiwami 1, Kiwami 2, 6, which is the last one with Kiryu, and now this one. So I really there's a set that remasters 3, 4, and 5 that I keep meaning to get and haven't gotten. Because 4 is my favorite. I like 4 because in that, even though Kiryu is still sort of the main guy, there's like 2 or 3 other characters you play as too. I really like 4. What's funny is there's a character in 4 who's a lot like a character that I created in a story I wrote, and now I feel like it's just like a ripoff because it was a cop, and even though he's technically a dirty cop, but he's not like a dirty cop because he's like corrupt or bad or anything. He just breaks the rules to help people. And the whole thing is like the people he specifically helps is like this section of town full of immigrants, and he's like friends with them, and he does what he can to help them and protect them. And I kind of wrote something like that a while ago because it wasn't set in Japan. The idea here is he's a Japanese guy, but he's talking to like Thai and Chinese people and stuff like that, and he's helping them out. Anyway, he's one of the main characters, and I really like him. And he's young too. He's only like in his late 20s or something. But in that, you're Kiryu, you're that cop, you're a loan shark guy with really fancy kicks, and you're also a yakuza that just got out of prison after serving a after or that he might have maybe he escaped prison while serving like a life term for murdering a bunch of yakuza back in the 80s. Anyway, I really like that one. That's my favorite one. 4. They're all very intricate. It's like this movie times 10. You know, even more characters, more betrayals, more plot twists and stuff, but you get to beat people up in the meantime and go to Sega
Mhm.
arcades. It makes me sad. You know, all the official Sega arcades are gone now. So even if I do
Really?
wind up living in
No.
Japan, I can't go to one anymore. There's no more official Sega
Mm.
arcades. They got bought by somebody and changed. So that makes me sad because I always thought I was never a big Sega person, but probably Yakuza is like my favorite Sega series by far. And I always thought it would be cool to finally go to one of those official Sega arcades. And now they don't have them anymore. Boo, boo earns. But yeah, so I mean, the last movie we did before this was the Kurosawa, and we had said we wanted to do some actual, some more Japanese directors because we have done 3
Mhm.
Kurosawa films and we've done 1 Ozu, and they're 2 of the big 3 Japanese directors, and we'll eventually get to the other guy too. But yeah, we want to branch out. This isn't a series or anything, but we just were sort of in the mood. We wanted to branch out and do some other Japanese directors because there's a lot of really interesting Japanese directors. And Takashi Kitano is, like we said, he's interesting for a whole other level too, because he's not just an interesting director, it's just he's an interesting guy with a crazy career as an actor and everything else. And I think it's really funny that like he first got famous as a comedian. I would love to see some of his like comedy bits because he was part of like a comedy duo. The other guy was also called Beat Kiyoshi, which is
He
pretty funny.
plays that, you know, deadpan, character so well that it's hard to imagine him like that.
It really
Uh,
is.
you know, in a comedic sense.
He said like it was really hard because originally like the audience wouldn't accept him as like a not funny guy. They would just laugh if they saw him just based on I guess expectations. But yeah, I really want to see that sex comedy getting any, see what that's like.
Hmm. What year did that come out?
95. Kind of a weird time because like in over here, sex comedies were almost dead in the mid 90s, right?
Yeah,
Sex comedies have become sort of a thing through the 80s, died in the 90s, and came back with American Pie.
yeah. There was a few of those, like Road Trip. Would that be considered one?
Yeah, most of them are really bad. Road Trip was pretty bad. That had Tom Green in a fairly small role. Of course,
Yeah,
then the abomination that became, or at least by that time, was the National Lampoon series, right? You have the official movies, then you just have all this spin-off garbage that they made that is so terrible, all this straight-to-video schlock.
yeah. Those really went downhill.
Mhm.
I think they're still making them too.
But yeah, the 2000s was sort of like a little bit of a renaissance for the sex comedy, although almost all of them were actually terrible. Remember there was a one where like a guy had to like go like a month or something without sex, as if like people don't do that all the time, and that was like the point of the movie. Or he couldn't have sex
Wasn't
or
that
masturbate or something. I don't know. Something days. I don't
wasn't
know.
um wasn't that the guy Heath Ledger who was in that?
Very well could have been. I don't remember
Maybe
because
not.
I didn't actually see it.
I didn't either.
But like Ryan Reynolds, he was Van Wilder, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Speaking of speaking of I actually like Euro Trip a lot. I like Euro Trip. That's one of the good ones that I like. And I love Michelle Trachtenberg in that.
Hmm.
She's so perfect in that movie. Ah, Josh Hartnett. But
Oh,
yeah,
Josh
Euro Trip is
Hartnett.
one of
That's
the
right.
yeah Euro yeah. What was that movie called though? Something Days or I need to find out.
30 Days and 30 Nights or something like that. It had a
Yeah,
number of days in the title.
I need to see.
Yeah, Van Wilder was
40
pretty
days.
much
Yeah,
the
40 days,
okay.
40 nights. But yeah, see, that's 2002. So just that era. Remember, there was a time, isn't it funny how there's always movies that come out that are like the same thing? Like there was that movie, there were like 2 volcano movies in the 90s that came out. So there was like
Yeah.
Volcano and Dante's Peak. And then what was it, like Deep Impact came out like in the
The
same
two
year as Armageddon
the
and things
two
like that.
asteroid movies. Yeah.
These might have been separated by a couple of years, but remember there were 2 different movies about friends with benefits. One was literally called Friends with Benefits, and one was called No Strings Attached, and they were both the same. One had like I don't
Oh.
one had like Mila Kunis and somebody, I think,
Mhm.
and one had
Ashton
Justin
Kutcher, I
Timberlake.
think. Or maybe
Okay,
not.
so like yeah, it's like
Yeah,
some
whatever then.
combination. I don't remember who's with who, but it's like Ashton Kutcher, Justin Timberlake, Natalie Portman, possibly Mila Kunis or somebody like that. Plenty of those movies were like the
Okay.
exact same thing. It's both. It's like we're 2 really attractive people, and we don't have time for relationships, so let's just boink. And oh, isn't it funny? In the end, we find out we're in love with each other.
Right.
So, it's like
Yeah.
both movies, and they came within at least like 2 years of each other or something like that. I haven't seen either all the way
Oh, yeah.
through. Oh man, Blown Away. Most people don't remember Blown Away, I don't think. There's really very little to remember. But yeah,
Is that
that
Dennis
seemed to always
Hopper?
happen. Dennis Hopper's also in Speed.
Okay, it wasn't that one then.
I can't remember who's in Blown Away. It's not very memorable. But yeah, movies seem to always come out like in pairs like that. But anyway, it is interesting. We talk about this too, with like genre wise, how these things run in cycles and things are so dead. Like when you're in the 90s, especially like the early to mid 90s, like horror is pretty much dead, especially like slashers.
Mhm.
They're dead. Um, like On an Island is like Candyman. Like Candyman's like all alone there in 1992. Anything else like that is like not well known at all until Scream in '96 revives it again. But then you've got like fantasy. Fantasy is pretty much dead in the '90s. The only fantasy that really existed in the '90s were like Disney animated movies, like live action fantasy, like none. And I would also say like sex comedy, which is sort of a small little subgenre, to the point where audiences didn't even seem to like want them, because there was that thing like I remember like Kevin Smith talking about how he'd done so well, indie darling with Clerks. A lot of people loved
Mhm.
it and did really well, launched his career, and like how disappointing it was, like the reaction to Mallrats. And I think some of that is because it was just the wrong time for like an R-rated sort of sex comedy type movie. And yet a few years later, they loved it for American Pie. He said like even in the script, I actually had a part where, like, how like there was like that bit how Jay and Silent Bob keep failing when they're trying to break the stage, and there's that bit where he keeps like running into, I can't remember her name, but the actress, when she's in the changing room and she's like, "You pervert," and stuff like that, and she like hits him in the head and everything. Like he said, I actually had a part at one point where like I don't think he's watching her or something, but like he's like, it's like Silent Bob is like jerking off, and it winds, and he doesn't even know she's there, and it like winds up going into her hair, and he's like, "They told me to cut that." They're like, "That's gross. People will flip out if that's in a movie." And yet there's like all these jizz jokes in American Pie. So
Well, that's exactly what happened in uh, something about Mary.
oh yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, and that's what he brought up first. And he said, then they did it in something like about Mary, and it was huge. And that was like 2 years
Mhm.
later. So yeah, you think something like Mary, which wasn't exactly a sex comedy, but had a bit of raunchiness, helps open the door for American Pie, which takes it further. Yeah,
Mhm.
these things just always seem to run in cycles, which I think is interesting. You can always point to a span of years or even a full decade, or maybe not an entire genre because that's too broad, but maybe like a subgenre is just dead.
I
Like
mean,
I'm trying to
comedy
think of
in
a sex
general is kind of dead. You know.
like a sex comedy from the '90s I can think of is like Ski School, but that's 1990. That's like the very start. That's worth a watch again if you enjoy some nice nudity, by the way. Another thing that we've
Mhm.
talked about, how like that we just want to move away from that in movies too. Like it was interesting watching Caddyshack. I'd never actually seen it the full way through, so I watched Caddyshack last week. It's pretty good. And it's just interesting that it just has gratuitous nudity for like no reason at all. And
Yeah.
nowadays they just wouldn't do that. They'd be like, "Well, nope." It's like we don't care how many movies Adam Sandler makes. There's not gonna be any tits in them. And yet it was just par for the course. Golf pun with Caddyshack and a lot of '80s comedies where
Nice.
you're like, you're gonna have, it's not exactly like super explicit, but you're gonna have like at least some boobs being shown. But that's gone away pretty much.
Mhm. Yeah, I can't think of any until American Pie came out in that
Yeah.
whole decade, basically.
So I'm very interested to see a mid '90s Japanese sex comedy that supposedly is kind of in the vein of something like Airplane. It's supposed to be kind of one of those like crazy anything
Oh
goes type
wow.
worlds where just crazy shit happens. So yeah, like I don't think it's a particularly raunchy movie from what I've read about it, although it does center around a guy trying to get some, which is remains really big in like a lot of play. It's funny, we talk about how like a lot of course American movies from the '80s don't have an aged well as far as some of that sex stuff goes. It's 10 times worse in places like China.
Mhm.
Like I really like the
Mhm.
Lucky Stars trilogy; they're great, but man, are they full of uncomfortable, rapey attempts at humor. Oh my god. But I guess that was just again normal back then, but also maybe more normal in like Hong Kong cinema again. And it's funny too because much less explicit. They're not showing any nudity, and they're not getting
Right.
as raunchy. but they're sort of just sort of like they're weird. It's weird. On the one hand, they're way more conservative than us, and on the other hand, they're much less conservative than us. It's interesting.
Yep, times have changed. You think of a movie like License to Drive. You know, you couldn't do that now. It's like constant references to date rape in that movie.
Yeah. I mean, pretty much like all of like John Hughes's movie have like this darkness to them.
Yeah.
If you look at them in a certain light, you're like, oh, that's very uncomfortable, actually. But you know, but
Pretty in Pink have a lot of that.
Yeah. Pretty in Pink is probably
got the really racist character, like Long Duck Dong or whatever.
Pretty in Pink, I would say, is the worst of all of those. If you're gonna say like the most problematic, the most sexist, the most racist, it's all there in Pretty in Pink. Which I think even when it came out, it must have been insulting to women. I have to imagine. Yeah, I haven't seen it in a while. I mean, we have time. We'll have to do some live commentaries of like some John Hughes movies at some point.
Sure. Yeah, I apologize. We intended on doing one this past Saturday, but my old laptop bit the dust. I think I'm gonna have to get a new computer sometime.
Yeah, that sucks.
Was having problems on this one for quite a while. It's why we got started so late.
Yeah, I've had some bad luck with hardware recently.
I don't know if it was the computer or StreamYard itself, but I was having all kinds of problems.
As soon as he says that. Oh, there we go. As soon as she said that, it like blipped for me for a second. I was like, shit, is that me or him?
Oh no.
It's okay now. It was only for a second. I was like, oh, it's gonna, because when you freeze, I don't know. Sometimes if you freeze for me, that actually means I'm frozen. Like I can't tell. Like maybe I'm frozen. But
it's probably me. I had to turn the quality down from 1080 because it was so jerky. I don't know what's going on.
Oh yeah.
But
I'd like to see his
comedies go. Like, oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. We'll stay on comedy.
I was going to say comedies are virtually dead completely now because of the environment around sex stuff and people being offended by jokes and stuff. So
I guess really most comedies now are more like comedy dramas. There's very few sort of like straightforward. It's the whole point is comedy movies these days. I mean, they are kind of risky ventures, I suppose.
Well, everyone's afraid of getting canceled, so it's really like no one's willing to do anything, take any risks,
I guess so. There's been a lot of bad ones too, though. Because I mean, somebody that says the same thing is who's that guy that did Joker? Todd Phillips. Like he whined about that, and I was like, "Well, I'm sorry, but your comedies just weren't any good anyway." Like, because he's like, "Oh, I stopped making comedies because cancel culture and all that shit." And I'm like, "Good, because your comedies suck."
What did he do?
He did the Hangovers movies.
Oh yeah, those suck.
Which I think blow.
I think Ken Jeong's the best part of those movies.
Yeah, he's pretty cool. But getting back to Kitano, speaking of like the movies he's done, you mentioned it early at the start there. It's like he did some sort of like not a remake, but kind of like a reboot of the Zatoichi series, of which there are so many movies. But I'd be interested to see his take on it. Because at one I've got there's a quote here, might be on Wikipedia. Somebody like called him like Kurosawa's like successor, which is like an insane thing to say about anybody.
It's very different than the original movies. Very different. It's very bloody and.
I know Kurosawa didn't do Zatoichi, but he got the samurai genre going. But Japanese film critic Nagaharu Yodogawa dubbed him the true successor to Kurosawa. So no pressure there.
Yeah, really.
I mean, this movie's not a great example. Yeah, this movie's not exactly a great example of really his filmmaking, because the whole point of this film, he said, was like he wasn't setting out to do anything other than just sort of making an entertaining movie, which is why he centered the whole thing around, just a bunch of sort of murders. He's like, I came up with a bunch of different ways to murder people, and then I sort of wrote the movie
Yeah.
around that, which is amusing. So you do get to see sort of a wide variety. Like most people get shot, but there's still some different stuff in there. Like we said, the car thing, a few things. What's another different one? Well, of course, we do have a grenade that blows some people up.
Yeah. Somebody had to have gotten stabbed at some point.
I mean, obviously, Atomo gets stabbed at the very end, but yeah, is there
Right.
another stabbing before that? Yeah, that's the other thing that and maybe they were trying to be more realistic. Although it is, you can walk the line here because obviously there is some tradition to it, but it's not like the Yakuza we see in, say, the Marvel Universe or something where they're all running around with swords. But Yakuza still keep swords around and do use them for special occasions sometimes. So
Yep.
I would have liked to have seen
The
somebody get killed with a sword, but it didn't happen in this movie. Maybe it'll happen in one of the sequels.
has to, right?
Yeah.
But
That's basically what. Sorry.
they really go out of their way to say, they say it like 2 or 3 times. The old ways are done. The finger chopping. That's you're wasting your time doing that. We don't do that anymore. So they're
Mm-hmm.
moving on to modern, more modern and changing the way they do things, which apparently means just double crossing everybody.
Yeah, it is interesting because if I was going to tell anybody that didn't really know anything about the Yakuza and try to explain, maybe how they differ from other crime organizations, I might say like tradition is like the biggest thing. Like nothing matters to them more than fucking tradition. So the idea that it's just like screw that tradition,
Hmm.
we're moving on, is pretty radical. Although it's not like
Yeah.
I've really kept up with what the real Yakuza has been doing the last 10, 15 years. So for all I know, they are reflecting real life. But I mean, if you play the Yakuza series or watch other older movies, it's drilled into your head over and over again that like nothing's more important than their goddamn traditions. And yet, this movie and the original movies, the Battles Without Honor and Humanity, will show over and over again. Yeah, well, they're still criminals though, so they'll still break their own rules to kill each other and fuck each other over.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of organized crime has gone away in the past, 30, 40 years. Like I know a lot of
Mm-hmm.
the Italian mafias in the US, they're pretty much extinct now.
What's
They
funny is
either
like
they
so
either
much
got
of it wasn't because of law enforcement, but because like the mafia used to have a pretty good hold on Vegas back in the day. It didn't get pushed out by
right.
law enforcement; it got pushed out by like big corporations, more or
Yeah.
less.
They either died, went to prison, or just, went legitimate, like got into a legitimate business. Like at the end of this movie, when they talk about the stock market, they could potentially move away from all the illegal stuff and just
Mm-hmm.
do that. So
Mm-hmm. It's very very lucrative.
so I don't know.
So
I
I mean, that's
mean,
one of the reasons why
maybe
something the Yakuza even still exists is because of tradition, right?
that's that's what I was gonna say. Like, I mean, maybe their numbers are dwindling. I don't have any idea.
Hmm.
I need Takashi Kitano to let me know.
Yeah, I will have to look into it because I really don't know how things stand. As I said, like for at least the last 20 some years, they've been very quiet in how they go about their business. Not a lot of loud violence like you're seeing in this movie, although stuff like that can still erupt now and then. And
Hmm.
a lot of it is just more based on intimidation than actual acts.
Hmm.
And also sort of a legal system that's sort of learned to accommodate them in a way, as we see here with the whole thing with the dirty cop. As you said, he's kind of the best placed in it. He's not actual Yakuza, but he's an asset to the Yakuza, and he has the law on
Hmm.
his side. So he's sort of benefiting in all those ways because he can make arrests here and there, which makes him look good and helps his career. But he's also getting paid by the Yakuza, and he also knows the Yakuza aren't going to like mess with him or kill him probably as long as he's useful to them, which he's all too happy to do. So I mean, while the movie, as we said, is fairly straightforward and to the point, it really makes the point sort of like it's all kind of a cycle repeating itself. For all this stuff that has happened and all this change, at the end, things aren't really that different. It's just different people doing the same stuff. Even the chairman himself is dead. And the guy that took over, they do point out that they're moving into stuff the old chairman wouldn't have done, like the stock market thing. So they aren't saying things haven't changed at all. But still, I feel like they're still saying more like it is kind of a cycle. That
Hmm.
maybe things have changed a bit and a lot of people are dead, but in the end, we're still kind of where we were. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Maybe that's not entirely accurate because they do make a point of saying he's done some things differently, but I don't know. But since he
What's
has
the name of the
experience with real
underboss?
life. Oh, sorry,
Sorry.
which underboss? Oh, the underboss that takes over at the end?
Yeah.
That's Kato.
What Kato, okay. He doesn't he look like he's trying to resemble the old chairman?
He's wearing his clothes.
I mean, his hair looks like his too, though. Like his hair looks different at the very end, you know.
Yeah.
I don't
Maybe
know.
they just think that's the way the chairman's supposed to look. I really don't know.
Yeah. Get your rose-colored glasses and grow your hair out a little bit.
Yeah. Many of Gitano's routines involved him portraying a gangster or other harsh characters. He said after playing comedy clubs, he was invited to drink with Yakuza, who would tell him stories about their crime bosses. So that's yeah. So he's had some real life experience with them. He was happy. Yeah,
Well,
he was in the film Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, cast as a tough POW camp sergeant during World War II. And that's the one I said David Bowie was in. Kitano said he was happy with his performance, and he snuck into a showing of the film to see how the audience would accept him as a serious actor instead of a comedian. He was devastated when the audience burst into laughter upon his appearing on screen, but vowed to stick to serious and dark characters in film, which is really what he's done. I guess he just wanted to prove that he's not one-dimensional, which I understand. People don't like being typecast. As we said many times, comedy is harder. You know, how many comedians and comedic actors do we know who have actually succeeded in becoming pretty good dramatic actors? I've seen some of them
oh,
fail and try hard and fail. Like, for instance, I don't think a lot of people disagree with me, but I personally don't think Adam Sandler has ever succeeded dramatically. I can't stand any of his dramatic roles. I couldn't even get through that last one he did on Cut Gems. I hated it. I hated it. Just to let
oh,
people like, I
really?
violently hated it. I didn't even make it 40 minutes, maybe a half hour, and I just wanted to throw something through the screen. But I mean, I also hate. And I mean not just dislike, I mean hate, strong hate
Mhm.
for Punch Drunk Love. I despise
I
it.
don't
I
like that
hate
one either.
Rain. I hate Rain Over Me. Funny people, I give credit for being kind of honest, but I still can't stand the movie. So,
I like
but
funny
you know,
people.
but people like Robin Williams have done pretty good jobs
Mhm.
doing.
Yeah,
Anyway, I'm
we've covered at least
over-laboring
one
the
on this
point.
show.
Yeah, yeah. I'm making too much out of this of a simple point, which if we've seen comedic actors do pretty well in dramatic roles, it's a lot harder for dramatic people to be funny. Because if you're not funny, you're not funny. It is
Yeah, that
always
is true.
nice finding out somebody who are used to being dramatic is pretty funny, like Patrick Stewart. Like, it's funny if you're a certain age, yeah, you're used to Patrick Stewart being funny. He's been pretty darn funny the last 20 years. But before that, no. But so it is. It's always interesting to see somebody that was always very serious, and they show that they can actually be pretty funny. But some people they just don't have it, even though they want to. But so yeah, it's interesting that what's his name, Kitano. It's really interested to him. It was really important to him to show that he was more than just a funny guy, and that he could be a serious actor. And he turned it into not just being a serious actor, but an acclaimed director.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
definitely, I think, that his versatility is really what makes him amazing. All these things that he can do, and even if you just look at his career within the context of being a director, he's a versatile director. If you look at how different his movies are, yes, he's done several Yakuza movies, but he's done a lot of different stuff mixed in there too. And I'm not saying they're all amazing, and I haven't even seen them, but I just
Mhm.
think it shows that he's far from a one trick pony. But yeah, I'd really be interested. I really am interested in his comedic past.
I want to read his
I think
poetry.
getting I think I think Getting Any is the only comedy movie he's directed, which is the main reason why I'm mostly that's the one I want to see the most. The movie features an airplane-like assemblage of comedic scenes centering on a Walter Mitty type character whose obsession is to have sex. Sounds good to me.
Walter Mitty.
Remember Walter Mitty?
Mhm. Is it Ben Stiller that did the movie on that?
Yeah, wasn't very good. But I mean, Walter Mitty, the original movie was back in like the 40s, I think.
Oh, I didn't realize there was
Just
another movie.
yeah, just about, which I think in turn was based on a comic strip, right? It's just about a guy that would daydream himself into situations.
Mm-hmm.
What's weird about the Ben Stiller movie is he does a little bit of that in the movie, but then he's not daydreaming. Then he's like doing real stuff. I guess they figured they wanted to give the movie some stakes. So he goes from daydreaming stuff to actually doing stuff. Remember, he goes to fucking Iceland in that movie, which I would love to do. I think a lot of us would love to be able to just drop what we're doing and go to Iceland, but it's not a reality for a lot of people. But I guess they say the whole thing about that movie is escapism, so whatever. But I did see Hanabi, which is a pretty good crime drama that focuses more on a cop than Yakuza, although Yakuza are in it. It's been so many years since I've seen it. And back when I saw it, I didn't know anything about Kitano or anything like that. So I'd like to see that again because I really don't remember it. But I'm pretty sure it's pretty good. And speaking of him being a painter too, the movie has like paintings that he did. They're in that movie. So, oh yeah, if we didn't mention, he's a painter too because he does everything.
That's so crazy.
What a guy.
Really doesn't get enough recognition, I don't think. I mean, you don't really ever hear his name mentioned. At least I don't.
No, I mean, I'd pretty much forgotten about him until you mentioned this movie. And when you said the movie, I didn't know the title or anything. And then you said Beat Takashi, and I was like, that's somebody, right? And then found out it was Takashi, Kitano, who I hadn't given a thought in a long time. And then when I looked, I had no idea he was in so much stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I had no idea he was a comedian to begin with. Never would have guessed that.
I know. He seems like a guy that always would be typecast as the, tough, serious guy.
Mm-hmm.
What's funny is he dies in so many of his own movies, too. Technically, he does die in this movie if you believe the dialogue at the end, but I guess the sequel invalidates that.
Yeah, I don't know how they go about it. I think the third one is a prequel, right? Is that right? Maybe.
Maybe. Let me click on that and make sure because it's called Outrage Coda. Coda doesn't sound like a prequel. Let me see.
Maybe not. I don't know why I was thinking it was a prequel.
No, it's not. Maybe because when we're thinking back when we did the British crime series. Remember we did Rise of the Foot Soldier, and they did a couple sequels to that, and they eventually did a prequel too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Still never watched those sequels.
Yeah, me neither. I should have.
I'm sure they're okay. Cool.
But like one of the main things I remember about him in Battle Royale is he plays the teacher. Is like he's just so deadpan and emotionless in that movie. You have the kids all freaking out because of what he's telling them they have to do and what's going to go on. Yeah. They make the teacher quite different in the movie than the book. He plays a bigger role in the movie than the book. What's funny is I'd like to get a newer edition of it because the Blu-ray I own, it's pretty funny. The Blu-ray has like an extra on it that I don't know if it's considered part of the movie or not. But you remember the main girl, like the girl that lives, right? One of the things they do in the movie that's not in the book is they make it like the teacher that he plays, like the teacher. Not like he was like obsessed or in love with her or anything like that, like nothing like that. But like she was his favorite student, and he did like genuinely like her because there's a whole thing. And now I think it probably really was him painting. So you might forget that during that movie, you can see in a while they're out killing themselves, he's back in the classroom, he's painting, and we don't get to see what he's painting till the very end. We see he's painted a picture of her. Anyway, on the Blu-ray I own, there's some extras in there, and one of the extras has this scene, and I don't know when or where it's supposed to take place but it's just him and her, and the school's kind of in the background, and they're just walking along and they're talking and they're having a conversation, and I have no idea what it's about because even though there's subtitles, it's very poorly and haphazardly done. So it just sounds like a bunch of meandering bullshit, and I have no idea what they're really saying to each other. So I had to really brush up on my Japanese so I can find out. And I remember it ends with him just saying something like, I don't even know why we're doing this. It's like, how am I supposed to have a serious conversation with a kid or something? And it just sort of ends. It's such a weird. It goes on for like 7 or 8 minutes where they just, I don't know. I'm sure if you understand Japanese, they're saying things that make sense and are of substance. But the Blu-ray I have, the translation is so bad that it's just a bunch of crap. Like, I have no idea what they're talking about at all. It's pretty funny. But yeah, now that I think about that, I bet you that he painted that himself, being the painter that he is. I mean, it's not in the book.
Yeah.
Why else would there be a painting? They were like, "Hey, Takashi, we know that you paint. Why don't you paint something in this movie? We can add that to the plot." That's a movie
I guess they
that,
figured
even
when they
though
got him, they wanted to utilize him a little more since they got him.
right, so yeah, so that's why they give the teacher a bit of bigger role, which I'm fine with. It's another. There's a very short list of movies where, like, despite being fairly different from the source material, I still like it almost as much. Akira's one, Jurassic Park is one, The Crow is one. Those are all movies that do make significant changes from the source material, but I don't mind, and I think they're pretty good. And I'd say Battle Royale's up there too. The book is better, but it's one of my favorite movies of all time. That movie's, when we talk about sort of our identities as like people that liked movies to people that love movies, and what we kind of sort of try to do here, being kind of critics and kind of not, I don't know what you want to call us, snobs. I mean, that was one of the movies that transformed me in the early 2000s. Like, I was at university and people talked about movies a lot. And like I said, I had my friend Sam who really got me into movies. He was a big David Lynch fan and he always sought out weird things. And I mean, that was another one. We found out about this movie where Japanese school kids are killing each other in this weird contest. Yeah. And we're like, that's awesome. Get that movie. And we watched it and I loved it and I still love it. It's one of my favorites. And yet it's another one of those movies that's so high for me, but it hits me emotionally so much that I barely ever watch it. Because I'm just like, I can't handle this right now.
Have you seen the sequel?
I have. I mean, it's not really the type of movie that lends itself to a sequel. It's kind of cool, but it'd probably just be better if it didn't exist.
I've seen it, but I don't remember anything about it.
It's not particularly memorable. What's funny is, if you go back into that time period when I was starting to collect movies and DVDs, is back at the HMV that was at the big mall that was there, they had a special edition of it that included both movies that had together, and it cost a fortune. It was like $69.99 or something, I don't know, but I always wanted to get it, but I didn't get it. And then it was one of the first probably Blu-rays I bought because it was just sort of a cheap Blu-ray, and I was like, okay, I'll get it. But I'll have to look into editions and see if you can get better editions. I mean, I wouldn't mind owning, if it has the set that has the second one, I wouldn't mind owning it and watching it again. Because like you, I mostly forget it. I remember a few things here and there. It's not bad or anything, but it's another one of those things where the first movie is just so good and has such an impact that it'd probably just be better if there wasn't another one. But yeah, I adore that movie. That was a big life-changing movie for me, for sure. So naturally, he's in it. Can't be surprised. It's funny when you find out somebody's sort of been in the background for a while, and you're like, "Wow, they're more important to me than I realized." Takeshi Kitano is kind of like that. And as we said, when you peel it back, he's just got so many layers. Yeah, Battle Royale 2 is called Requiem because, cool title. What's funny is,
never used that one before.
Of course, the original movie was based on a novel. The second movie was not. But after the second movie came out, a different author made a novel based on the movie. It's just kind of funny.
That's interesting.
But yeah, that's another one that I need to see again. So maybe I can look into and see if you can still get them like as a set or something. There's nothing wrong with the Blu-ray I have, but there's not a lot of stuff with it. And that is one of my all-time favorite movies. I think it's like at 25 or something.
I think they put out. Oh, that's your number 25.
It's somewhere in there. It's like mid-20s, I think. Yeah.
Man, I get past like 3 or 4, and I'm just lost. Like,
it's not like I have that by memory. And keep in mind, I base this also on Flickchart, so not everything on there is a movie. Like, for instance, somewhere around 30 is like It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, which is not a movie, but it's counted amongst those, so it skews things a bit. But yeah, I mean, I remember my top like 2025 pretty well, maybe not entirely in order. But yeah, I mean, after that, it gets tough. and I'm always rearranging them on Flickchart. It's very difficult. I mean, you can keep doing it if you want to make any progress on Flickchart. You can't just do it randomly. You have to start like making settings, or you'll get nowhere. And one of the things you have to do once you've done it a long time is bring it down to your top 1,000, because that's the only way you'll really get rankings you want. Because it's going to make you suddenly pit movies against each other that it will really actually make you think. Because if you just go into Flickchart and you have like a few thousand movies like me or you can just like click all day and not make any changes. Like, well, obviously this is better than this. This is better than that. Easy. But if you do your top 1,000, like every second time, you're like, oh God, I don't know. So I recommend that if people actually give a shit about that. I know most people don't really. I'm glad Flickchart exists though, because people like me, I'm always ranking things. I always have to think how things stack up in comparison to each other. I just can't help it. It's the way I'm built. And then I'll break them down into things. My favorite action movie of the 90s, or, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite gothic horror movie. And it lets me do all that. So I like it. But yeah, if I remember right around 25. So very high. I mean, anything like in my top like 250 are all like movies that I just, adore. Obviously, because I've got some 3,000 some on there. Again, not every single one is a movie. Sometimes they're TV specials and things like that, but most of them are full-length movies.
And that's tough. I don't know if I can do it.
Speaking of Battle Royale, its director was, he died soon after, Kinji Fukasaku. I'm trying to see what else he did, because he was a guy that did that late in life, and he'd been directing since like the goddamn 60s.
Yeah, I know he did a lot.
Here we go. Guess what? He was the director of the Battles Without Honor and Humanity series.
Okay.
So there's a nice tie-in. The guy that did Battle Royale was the director of the original sort of great Yakuza movies. Those being Battles Without Honor and Humanity, Battles Without Honor and Humanity, Deadly Fight in Hiroshima, Battles Without Honor and Humanity, Proxy War, Battles Without Honor and Humanity, Police Tactics, and Battles Without Honor and Humanity, Final Episode, which I don't think I saw. And then there was also one called New Battles Without Honor and Humanity, which he also directed. And I don't know if that counts as officially one of them or if it's kind of like a remake. But they were all made between 73 and 74. So he just pumped those out. And like they're even... Jesus, there's another one. Well, there's even more than I thought. In 75, New Battles. Okay, so I've only seen like half of them. New Battles Without Honor and Humanity, the boss said. Okay, so they went from Battles Without Honor and Humanity to like a separate second series called New Battles Without Honor and Humanity. Pretty cool. But anyway, he directed all those. And I guess I've seen the first 4 maybe. For a while, I don't have it anymore. But yeah, the Battle Royales are the last 2 movies he directed before he died.
Oh, he did 2 also? Oh, okay.
That was his final. That was his final movie. But I guess I can't say outside those because I don't know enough about his other movies. Because if we said like this movie was fairly brisk and straightforward, it's nothing compared to Battles Without Humanity, which like this movie I said doesn't have much characterization or character development. Those have even less. They're just breakneck. Betrayal, fight, kill. And it is cool too, because unlike some movies like with stylized violence, the violence isn't stylized at all. In fact, a lot of the guys, it's probably their first time killing somebody or using a gun or something, and it shows. You'll have a guy it's like there's a guy down the street, you need to assassinate him. They'll give him a gun. And he'll like just run down the middle of the street wildly firing, hitting a bunch of people until he maybe hits the guy, maybe not. Like it's sloppy as hell, which is pretty cool because it's probably realistic. Those movies are nuts.
Yeah.
For a while, I don't know now, but like 2 years ago when I had a subscription to Shudder, they were on Shudder, even though they're not horror. But anyway, that director once again
for me at one point
is Kinji Fukasaku. So, trying to think of other Japanese directors that we might do. I know somebody wanted us to do Sono years ago. Remember Sono?
Mm-hmm.
He did some weird ass movies.
I'd like to do some Takashi Miike if we could at some point.
Right. So that's Scion Sono. I'm just taking a look here. The last movie I watched of his was Tag, which is just a ridiculous movie. But
Tag is awesome. that bus decapitation, man,
It's pretty special, yeah.
that caught me
But
off guard.
I heard
It's like
Suicide
2
Club is
minutes
good.
in.
I remember we talked about this. You told me that Strange Circus is very good, and I have not seen that yet. You saw that, right? I think you told me it's very
Mhm,
good. Yeah.
mhm. It's weird, but it's good.
Yeah. And he's still doing stuff. He did a movie in 2021, Prisoners of the Ghostland. So he's pretty prolific. I always wanted to see Suicide Club.
I
That's from
think I've seen that.
2001. It's kind of like a horror movie with obviously again suicide and stuff. I'd like to see that. So speaking of other Japanese directors we want to get to, he's definitely one too. Sion Sono, and like you said, Takashi Miike, who was known for sort of extreme stuff.
Mhm.
So yeah, some definitely we'll be looking at in the near future. I think we'll probably the next episode will be something else to break things up because we're not doing a series. But yeah, we're not going to forget about this because I know sometimes we make
Mhm.
plans and then we get sidetracked by other things. But no, do that for sure. Because yeah, as we said, we've been doing the show for a few years. So I think we probably intended to do more Japanese directors by this point, but shit happens.
Well, that's
But
why we
anyway, yeah,
started the show, was to do stuff like this, so,
right, yeah, stuff
mhm.
the foreign
More
movies
foreign
and
language.
underground movies
Mhm.
and things like that. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, there's a good chance maybe next week will be something else foreign, at least. We will
Hmm.
figure that out and try to pass that on to you. As I said, we got a little uh, uh, disrupted this time because Jay had some issues with the laptop and things like that are going to happen. But yeah, we will try to figure out the next couple and pass that on to you guys, so give you a bit of a heads up of what we're doing. But finish up here on Outrage. Definitely a cool movie. It took me a few watches to kind of fully absorb everything, just not because it's complicated exactly, just because there's a lot of characters and stuff happens at a fast pace. And I felt like, remember that Seinfeld bit, right? Right, you're in the theater, just like, who's that guy? Oh, why did they kill that guy? Oh, he was with them. I thought he was with them. Like that's kind of
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
felt like the first time I watched this movie. I was like, wait a second, those two, I don't know those two. They're following him. Obviously, they're going to kill him, but they're with who? Like that was happening a lot through
Well,
the movie. But
they're constantly, like, switching sides and betraying each other, so it's hard to follow, I mean, it really is.
and the editing is so quick because there's one
Mhm.
scene. It's not action. It's conversations. There's a scene where we're at the compound, like where the chairman is, and the chairman is talking to some people, talking about the situation. And twice it flips back to Murasei somewhere else, but in a place that looks almost identical, talking to his guys. You could, if you look away or something, or miss a line, you might think they're all in the same room talking to each other, but they're not.
Mhm.
And of course, it wouldn't make sense. But it's that kind of thing happens at least once or twice in that movie, where like an edit is kind of so quick, where if you miss it, you'll kind of be lost for a few seconds at least. I was. So
Yeah.
it has a very sort of rapid editing style too, which I mean, it fits. It's a fast paced movie, so it makes a lot of sense. I get it from that perspective. But I mean, some of his like stuff that might be more of a signature style is kind of missing from this movie. Because although they do talk about, I mean, it is true that he has a camera that will be stationary a lot. That is in some of this movie. I think there's probably better examples of it in other movies. The king of that in Japan, of course, was Ozu.
Mhm.
It's funny how much modern films have changed. Like I know I harp about this too much because I'm a fan of the long, and I know the other thing too. Like we've talked about, I was looking back on some of our past episodes where we talk about long takes because the long, and I realized in cinema circles and people that are into film, it's definitely kind of the most jerked off to thing out there, right? Like, oh, the long take. What a brilliant artist. Yeah. I get that it can be a little overrated. Doesn't mean the show good was because I was watching some of our episode on Children of Men. And Children of Men has two really interesting sequences that are basically long takes. One is our characters trying to escape from a place in a car, being chased by guys, and then there's that sort of war in the city thing towards the end. That's a very long take. With the blood gets on the camera and everything. And I realized that, like, I don't know, sometimes maybe that gets overvalued a bit. But the other thing that I miss that is in old type movies and has really gone away, especially since like say the 80s, is sort of a static shot of like people talking, like where you can see everybody. Because nowadays almost every movie, if you have like two or more characters having a conversation, it's just close up on this person's face, flip to close up on this person's face, you know.
Hmm.
I that's fine, but I get a little tired of it. I kind of miss things where we can just see where everybody is, and it's kind of more like a play, and we just see where everybody is, and there's some blocking. I just get a little sick of quick close-ups all the time. They serve their purpose. I'm not saying never do them, but so I'm always attracted to those older movies or those directors that are modern that still do that kind of stuff. Kitano does do a little bit of that in this movie, but it's very subtle.
Hmm.
You wouldn't really be thinking about it unless you had reason to think about it. But anyway, definitely a cool movie. I want to see the sequels. I'm glad his character is back because I mean, if you see the movie, it makes sort of sense for him to die. But if you're going to do sequels, I definitely want that character. Although character is not really important in the movie, he still sort of is the main guy. So yeah, I'm glad that
Yeah.
we get to see him again. Maybe the other movies have a slightly different style. Maybe they do more character building or development. I don't know. I'm interested to see that. But as I said, I don't like picking on movies or criticizing them for things they deliberately don't do because it's
Hmm.
not like the movie lacked characterization. The movie just doesn't bother with characterization. So I think there's a difference there. So I don't want to pick on it for that. I definitely like the movie. I'm glad to have seen it and sort of have my eyes opened a bit about Takashi Kitano, who I knew a little bit, but this really revealed just sort of the full scope of his crazy career. And I love Takashi's Castle in MXC. That's such a great memory for me. And at the time,
Yeah.
again, knowing it was obviously a gag dub of a Japanese show, but I had no idea about how old it was for one thing. I didn't know it was from the late 80s. And the other thing, when it was called Takashi's Castle, like I didn't associate that with a specific person. I didn't realize it's
Yeah.
because oh, he was a big celebrity at the time and it was a big popular show. Like so it's cool finding stuff like that out.
I
He's
had no
definitely
idea he was on that.
he's one of like Japan's premier character actors and directors. I mean, that's pretty cool that
Hmm.
he's both. So yeah, definitely a cool watch. So thanks so much for being with us tonight. There's no need to drag this out. So hopefully we can sort out various technical issues and get going again with another movie next week. Probably not another Japanese movie, but as we said, it is a priority for us to get to some of those other Japanese directors that we've discussed. So I'm sure within the next little while that will be a priority. So stay tuned for that too. So thanks, guys.
Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Good night. Bye bye.